Long ago, when the nights were darker and the winds whispered through the trees, there was a fear that settled deep in the hearts of the people. It wasn't the kind of fear that came from wild animals or the howling of wolves. No, this fear was different, more personal, as if something unseen was always watching, waiting in the shadows. This was the fear of the Boggart, a creature as old as the land itself, rooted in the very soul of English folklore. The Boggart was not just any creature, it was a being that took on many forms, but its essence was always the same. It thrived in the places where people were most vulnerable, the quiet corners of a home, the dense forests that surrounded villages, the dark, damp cellars where light never reached. The Boggart was the unknown made real, the embodiment of every fear that lived in the minds of those who heard its name whispered in the dark. People said that the Boggart was born from the oldest fears, the kind that lingered even before stories had names. In the days when fire was the only source of warmth and light, the Boggart was the chill that crept into the bones, the unease that kept eyes wide open in the dead of night. It was said that the first Boggarts emerged from the wild places of the world, where the veil between the seen and the unseen was thinnest. These ancient beings were tied to the land, growing from the very soil, as old as the rocks and as ageless as the wind. The Boggart was a reflection of the fear that came from living close to the wild. When the nights were long, and the wind howled through the cracks in the walls, people would speak of the Boggart with hushed voices, afraid that even mentioning its name might summon it. The tales passed down from one generation to the next, each one adding a new layer of fear, each story more terrifying than the last. Some believed that the Boggart was a spirit, neither good nor evil, but simply a force of nature. It was not bound by the laws of man or beast. It moved between worlds, a shadow in the corner of the eye, a creak on the floorboards, the feeling of being watched when no one was there. Others said that the Boggart was once human, cursed to wander the earth in a twisted form, forever bound to the places it once called home. These stories were told in whispers around the hearth, as the fire flickered and cast long shadows on the walls. The Boggart was not just a thing of the past, it was a presence that never truly left. It was said that every home had its own Boggart, a spirit that lived in the walls, under the floorboards, or in the attic. Some Boggarts were mischievous, moving objects, causing milk to sour, or making doors slam shut. But others were darker, more malevolent, and their presence could turn a warm, welcoming home into a place of dread. In some villages, it was believed that the Boggart was drawn to the unhappiness of a household. The more misery that filled the home, the stronger the Boggart became. It fed on the sadness, the anger, and the fear, growing more powerful with each passing day. The stories told of families driven to madness by the relentless torment of their Boggart, unable to escape its grasp, no matter how far they ran. The origins of the Boggart were tied to the land, and the people who lived there knew that they could never truly escape it. It was said that if a family tried to leave their home to escape a Boggart, they would hear a voice call out from behind them, "And I'm coming with you." This was the Boggart's curse, a reminder that it was not just a creature of place, but of people, bound to them by their deepest fears. In some tales, the Boggart was seen as a protector of the land, a guardian of the old ways, punishing those who disrespected nature or the spirits of the earth. Farmers who mistreated their animals, or who failed to offer thanks to the spirits, would find their crops failing, their livestock sick, and their homes plagued by the Boggart. In this way, the Boggart was both feared and respected, a reminder of the ancient ties between humans and the land they lived on. As the years passed, the stories of the Boggart became more varied, each region of England having its own version of the creature. In some places, the Boggart was a small, goblin-like being, hiding under bridges or in caves. In others, it was a shapeless shadow, moving silently through the night. But no matter the form, the essence of the Boggart remained the same, an embodiment of the fears that had haunted humanity since the beginning of time. The fear of the Boggart was more than just superstition, it was a part of the fabric of life. It was a way of understanding the unknown, of giving shape to the things that could not be explained. The Boggart was the darkness that lived in every shadow, the terror that came from knowing that there were things in the world that could not be seen or understood. Even as the world changed, as villages grew into towns and cities, and the wild places were tamed, the Boggart remained. It adapted, moving into the dark corners of urban life, where fear still thrived. The stories were passed down, from parent to child, each generation adding their own fears to the legend. The Boggart was no longer just a creature of the wild, it was a creature of the mind, living in the fears that have always been with us. And so, the Boggart continued to exist, not just as a creature of myth, but as a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that no matter how much we think we understand the world, there will always be things that we cannot see, cannot touch, but can only feel in the deepest parts of our being. The Boggart was the darkness in the corner of the room, the chill that ran down the spine, the feeling of being watched when no one was there. It was the fear that never truly went away, because it was part of what it meant to be human, to live in a world where the unknown still lurked in the shadows. There's a chill in the air, a shiver that runs down your spine. You're alone, but it feels like someone's watching you, something just out of sight, hidden in the shadows. This is the feeling that a Boggart brings, the sense that something isn't quite right, that something is lurking where you least expect it. Boggarts are creatures that defy simple descriptions. They aren't bound by one form, and that's what makes them so terrifying. A Boggart could be a small, twisted figure, hunched and gnarled, with eyes that glint in the darkness like cold, unfeeling stones. Or it might be a shadow, a dark presence that hovers at the edge of your vision, never fully seen but always there, a constant reminder of the unknown. Some say Boggarts take on the appearance of animals, an old, mangy dog with glowing eyes, or a cat with fur as black as the night, watching with an intelligence that feels far too human. But a Boggart's true nature is not in how it looks, but in the fear it spreads. The appearance is only the beginning, a way to unnerve, to unsettle. It's the feeling of dread that grows, the creeping sensation that there's something terribly wrong. Boggarts are creatures of fear, feeding on the unease they create, growing stronger with every frightened glance, every whispered word of caution. A Boggart's behavior is as unpredictable as its form. It's a creature of mischief, yes, but its tricks are not the harmless pranks of a playful spirit. Instead, they are the kind that turn laughter into gasps, that make the familiar world seem strange and threatening. A Boggart might move objects when no one is looking. Your keys that were on the table a moment ago are now across the room, or a chair you left in one place is suddenly somewhere else entirely. It's the kind of trickery that makes you doubt your own mind, that makes you question what you know to be true. But not all Boggarts are content with simple mischief. Some are darker, more dangerous. They might pull at your clothes as you pass through a dark room, or brush against your skin with icy fingers. They might whisper your name in a voice that isn't quite human, or laugh softly in the night when there's no one around. The sound is faint, almost like the wind, but you know it's something else. It's the Boggart, playing with your fear, enjoying the way your heart races, the way your breath catches in your throat. The fear that a Boggart evokes is not just about what it does, but what it makes you feel. It's the way it turns the ordinary into something terrifying. A dark hallway becomes a place of danger, a quiet night is filled with the threat of something unseen. The Boggart takes the familiar and makes it strange, and in doing so, it makes you feel vulnerable, exposed. Some say that Boggarts are attracted to places where fear already lingers. A house where there has been great sorrow, a place where terrible things have happened, these are the places where a Boggart might choose to dwell. It feeds on the emotions left behind, growing stronger as it taps into the fear and sadness that still hangs in the air. The Boggart becomes a part of the place, a living reminder of the darkness that once was, and the darkness that could be again. There are stories of Boggarts that have driven entire families from their homes. These are not just stories of mischief, but of terror. A Boggart might start with small things, a missing object here, a strange noise there. But as the fear grows, so does the Boggart's power. It becomes bolder, more aggressive. Doors slam shut on their own, footsteps echo through empty rooms, and cold drafts chill the air even when there's no wind. The family becomes trapped in their own home, prisoners of the fear that the Boggart has created. But the worst part of a Boggart's nature is that it seems to know you. It knows what scares you most, what makes you feel unsafe. It uses that knowledge to torment you, to push you to the edge. For some, it might be the fear of the dark, the fear of being alone. For others, it might be the fear of something terrible happening, something that you can't control. The Boggart brings these fears to life, turning them into something real, something you can't escape. And yet, despite all this, Boggarts are not always purely evil. Some stories suggest that they are more like wild animals, creatures that are simply acting according to their nature. They don't torment for the sake of cruelty, but because it is in their nature to do so. They are drawn to fear, and they create fear because that is what sustains them. In a strange way, they are as much victims of their own nature as those they torment. But understanding this doesn't make them any less terrifying. The Boggart is still a creature of the shadows, a being that exists to unsettle, to disturb. It's the fear that lurks in the back of your mind, the terror that something is there, just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. It's the knowledge that no matter how safe you feel, no matter how much light you surround yourself with, there is always the possibility that a Boggart is watching, waiting, ready to turn your world upside down. In the end, the nature of a Boggart is the nature of fear itself, shifting, changing, never fully understood. It's the feeling that something is wrong, that something terrible is just around the corner. It's the unease that keeps you awake at night, the fear that something is lurking in the dark, something you can't see but know is there. And that's what makes the Boggart so terrifying, because it is not just a creature of myth, but a reflection of the deepest, most primal fears that live within us all. In the quiet corners of England, where the mist clings to the rolling hills and the trees whisper ancient secrets, the Boggart takes many forms. It is not just one creature but many, shaped by the land it haunts, each with its own dark personality. The tales of the Boggart are as old as the stones that line the country lanes, and as varied as the landscapes they inhabit. In every region, the Boggart wears a different face, but the fear it brings is always the same, a fear that grips the heart and chills the soul. In the moors of Lancashire, the Boggart is a creature of the wild, a being born of the desolate, windswept landscape. Here, the Boggart is often seen as a dark, shadowy figure that lurks in the fog, moving silently through the night. It is said that this Boggart is a spirit of the land itself, a guardian of the moors who punishes those who dare to trespass. The people of Lancashire speak of the Boggart with a mixture of fear and respect, knowing that to anger it is to invite disaster. Crops fail, livestock disappear, and strange, unexplainable noises echo through the night when the Boggart is displeased. The very air seems heavy with its presence, pressing down on the villagers, making every breath feel like a struggle. Travel east, and the Boggart takes on a different guise. In Yorkshire, it is known as the hob, a small, goblin-like creature that hides in the dark places of the home. This Boggart is a mischievous spirit, fond of playing tricks on the unsuspecting. It hides things, makes the milk go sour, and tangles the hair of children as they sleep. But there is a darker side to the hob, a side that emerges when it feels threatened. Then, the playful spirit becomes something far more sinister, turning its tricks into cruel torments. It whispers in the night, making the walls close in, making the darkness seem deeper, more suffocating. The people of Yorkshire know better than to anger a hob, for once it is roused, it is nearly impossible to appease. In the deep forests of the Midlands, the Boggart is something else entirely. Here, it is a creature of the woods, a being that blends in with the trees and the shadows they cast. It is said that the Boggart of the Midlands is a shapeshifter, able to take on the form of any animal, or even a person. But its eyes always give it away, cold, unblinking, and filled with a malice that chills the blood. This Boggart is a hunter, stalking those who wander too far into the woods, leading them deeper and deeper until they are hopelessly lost. The air in the forest seems to grow thicker, the light dimmer, as if the Boggart itself is drawing the very life out of the place. The people of the Midlands speak of it in hushed tones, warning their children never to stray too far from home, lest they fall prey to the Boggart's tricks. Further south, in the marshlands of Somerset, the Boggart is a creature of water and mud. It is said to live in the bogs, rising up from the muck to snatch those who wander too close to its lair. This Boggart is a formless thing, a mass of slime and filth that seeps through the ground, bubbling up in unexpected places. It is a creature of decay, of things that rot and fester in the dark, wet places of the world. The villagers of Somerset fear the Boggart, for it is not just a creature of the land, but a harbinger of death. Crops fail, and sickness spreads when the Boggart is near, and there is no way to fight it, no way to drive it off. It is a part of the land itself, as old and as relentless as the marshes it calls home. In the cities, too, the Boggart finds a place to dwell. In the winding streets of London, the Boggart is a creature of the fog, a being that hides in the shadows of the alleyways and the abandoned buildings. It is a whisper in the night, a flicker of movement just at the edge of sight. The London Boggart is a creature of fear, feeding on the unease that comes from living in a place where the past and the present are always colliding. It is said that the Boggart of London can slip through the cracks in the walls, can move unseen through the streets, bringing with it a sense of dread that lingers long after it has gone. The city itself seems to shiver in its presence, as if even the stones and the bricks can feel the cold touch of the Boggart. But no matter where it is found, the Boggart is always a creature of fear, a being that exists to remind us of the things we cannot control, the things we do not understand. It is a reflection of the land it inhabits, shaped by the history and the stories of the people who live there. In every region, the Boggart takes on a new form, a new face, but its essence remains the same. It is the darkness in the corner of the room, the chill in the air, the feeling that something is watching, waiting. It is the fear that we carry with us, the fear that there is something out there, something we cannot see, but know is there. The Boggart is a part of the land, a part of the people, and as long as there is fear, the Boggart will continue to haunt the shadows, waiting for the moment when the light fades and the darkness takes hold. It begins with a whisper, a tale passed from one trembling voice to another. Over time, that whisper grows, changing with each retelling, until it becomes a roar, echoing through the ages. The Boggart, once a shadowy figure lurking in the corners of the old world, has shifted and twisted with the passing years, becoming something both ancient and ever-changing. The Boggart story is one of evolution, a creature that has adapted, taking on new forms, new fears, as the world around it has changed. In the earliest days, when the world was vast and unexplored, the Boggart was a creature of the wild. It was the terror that lived in the dark woods, the unseen force that could pull you from the safety of your home into the cold embrace of the night. Back then, the Boggart was raw and untamed, a reflection of the world itself, a place where the unknown was a constant threat, where the land itself seemed alive with malevolent intent. People whispered of Boggarts that would snatch children from their beds, that would steal away the weak and the unwary, leaving nothing but cold, empty silence in their wake. The fear was primal, a fear of the wild and the unknown, a fear that something beyond understanding was lurking, waiting to strike. As time moved on, so too did the Boggart. The wilds were tamed, the forests cut down, the open land settled. But the Boggart did not vanish with the wilderness. It adapted, moving closer to the hearth, to the homes of the people who once feared the dark outside. The Boggart became a creature of the household, no longer a distant threat, but something much closer, much more intimate. It was the thing that made the floorboards creak at night, that moved objects when no one was looking, that whispered in the dark just as you were drifting off to sleep. It played tricks, small at first, things going missing, strange noises, a cold draft where there should be none. But those tricks grew darker, more sinister, feeding off the fear of the people who lived there. The Boggart was no longer just a creature of the wild, but a reflection of the growing unease, the fear that even within the safety of your own home, something could go wrong, something could come for you. With the rise of towns and cities, the Boggart evolved again. It became a creature of the streets, of the dark alleyways and the abandoned buildings. It was the shadow that followed you home, the flicker of movement in the corner of your eye. The Boggart was now a part of the urban landscape, a being that fed off the fears of a new kind of life, one where people were surrounded by others, yet more alone than ever. The Boggart became a symbol of the unknown dangers that lurked in the crowded, yet isolated, world of the city. It was the fear of crime, of poverty, of the things that could happen to you when you let your guard down. The Boggart was now a creature of the night, slipping through the cracks in the pavement, through the shadows cast by the towering buildings, always there, always watching. As the years passed, the Boggart story continued to change. It became a tale told to children, a way to keep them in line, to teach them the dangers of disobedience. The Boggart became a cautionary tale, a figure that would come for you if you didn't behave, if you strayed too far from the path. But even as it was used to teach, the fear it inspired was very real. Children would lie awake at night, staring into the darkness, waiting for the Boggart to come creeping out of the shadows. The Boggart became a part of the collective consciousness, a figure that lived not just in the stories, but in the minds of those who feared it. In more modern times, the Boggart has continued to evolve, taking on new forms as society has changed. The Boggart is now a creature of the mind as much as the world, a being that represents the fears that we cannot shake, the anxieties that come with modern life. It's the fear of the unknown, of things that cannot be controlled. It's the fear of the future, of what might be lurking just beyond the horizon. The Boggart has become a symbol of the things that keep us awake at night, the worries that gnaw at us even when everything seems fine. It's the fear of losing control, of something slipping through the cracks, of something terrible happening without warning. Yet, despite all these changes, one thing remains the same: the Boggart is always a creature of fear. It has adapted and evolved, but its essence has never changed. The Boggart is still that whisper in the dark, that shadow in the corner of your eye. It's the thing that makes your heart race, that makes you look over your shoulder even when you know there's nothing there. It's the fear that something is coming, something you can't see, but you know is there, waiting. The Boggart has survived through the ages because it is not just a creature of myth, but a reflection of the fears that live within us all. It has changed with the times, taken on new forms, new faces, but at its core, it is always the same, a being that thrives on fear, that lives in the shadows, that haunts our dreams. The Boggart is as old as the hills, as ancient as the land itself, but it is also as new as the latest fear, the latest anxiety that keeps us up at night. It is a creature that has evolved alongside us, growing stronger as our fears have grown, adapting to the changing world, but always remaining the same at heart. In the end, the Boggart is not just a story, not just a creature of folklore, but a symbol of the fear that we all carry with us. It is the fear of the unknown, the fear of the things we cannot control, the fear that something is lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. The Boggart is the darkness that lives within us all, the thing that makes us afraid, the thing that keeps us looking over our shoulders, waiting for the moment when the light fades and the shadows come to life. In the quiet moments when the world is hushed and the night has settled in, there is a sense that something lingers just beyond the edge of sight. It's a presence that stirs in the shadows, where the light cannot reach. In English folklore, these shadows are filled with beings that defy explanation, creatures that slip between the cracks of reality. Among them, the Boggart is not alone. It is part of a larger tapestry, woven with threads of the supernatural, where spirits, goblins, and ghosts all share the same dark corners of the world. The Boggart, with its menacing tricks and ominous presence, seems to dance along the same lines as these otherworldly beings. It shares a kinship with the mischievous goblins, those small, twisted creatures that delight in causing chaos and confusion. Like the Boggart, goblins are often tied to specific places, lurking in old houses, deep woods, and lonely roads. Both are creatures of the in-between, existing in a space where the ordinary world meets the extraordinary. They are the embodiment of mischief turned malevolent, where a simple prank can quickly turn into something far more terrifying. But the Boggart is not just a cousin to the goblins, it also shares a close bond with the spirits that wander the English countryside. Ghosts and Boggarts often seem to walk the same paths, their presence is felt in the cold drafts that sweep through an old house or the sudden chill that wraps around a person in the dead of night. There is a belief that some Boggarts might actually be the spirits of the dead, twisted by anger or sorrow into something dark and malevolent. These are not the gentle, mournful ghosts that softly weep in the night, but spirits driven by a need to torment the living, to bring about fear and despair. In some tales, Boggarts are said to be spirits of those who were wronged in life, their souls unable to find peace. They haunt the places where they suffered, where their pain and anger have rooted them to the earth. These Boggarts are particularly dangerous, as they carry with them all the bitterness and rage of a life cut short. Their connection to the ghostly realm gives them a power that is both terrifying and tragic, a power born from suffering, from an existence that was never allowed to find rest. Then there are the fairies, those elusive, otherworldly beings that flit through English folklore with an air of mystery and danger. The Boggarts' relationship with fairies is complex, for while fairies can be kind and helpful, they can also be vengeful and cruel. There is a darkness in the fairy realm, a side that is capricious and unpredictable. It is said that some Boggarts might once have been fairies themselves, twisted and corrupted by some dark force or curse. These Boggarts retain a touch of the otherworldly, a hint of magic that makes them even more dangerous. They are creatures of both worlds, straddling the line between the fairy realm and the mortal one, bringing with them a chaos that is beyond human comprehension. The Boggart also finds its place among the creatures that dwell in the wild places, those beings that are tied to the land itself. Like the water spirits that haunt the rivers and lakes, or the tree spirits that dwell in ancient forests, the Boggart is often seen as a guardian of the natural world, a dark, twisted guardian, but a guardian nonetheless. It punishes those who would harm the land, who would disturb the natural order. In this way, the Boggart is both a protector and a punisher, a creature that exists to maintain a balance that humans often fail to understand. The connection between Boggarts and these other supernatural beings is not just one of shared characteristics, but of shared purpose. They are all creatures that serve as reminders of the things that exist beyond the veil of the ordinary, the things that lie in wait in the dark. They are manifestations of the fears and anxieties that have plagued humanity for centuries, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the wild, the fear of death itself. They are the shadows that stretch across the world, growing longer as the light fades, until they seem to consume everything in their path. In the end, the Boggart is a creature that belongs to this larger world of the supernatural, a world where the boundaries between the living and the dead, the real and the unreal, are blurred. It moves among the spirits, the goblins, the fairies, and the nature spirits, a being that is both a part of them and apart from them. It is a creature that cannot be easily defined, for it is always changing, always adapting, just as the fears it represents are always changing, always finding new ways to manifest. The Boggart's place in this supernatural world is one of mystery and fear, a creature that, like the others, serves as a reminder of the darkness that exists just beyond the light. It is a being that feeds off the terror it inspires, growing stronger with each shiver, each whispered tale. And just like the ghosts, the goblins, and the fairies, the Boggart will continue to haunt the world as long as there are people to fear it, as long as there are shadows for it to hide in, and as long as there are those who believe in the things that go bump in the night. There is a stillness in the air, a hush that falls over the land when the tales of Boggarts are told. In the quiet corners of old houses, in the shadowed groves of ancient forests, these stories live on, whispered from one generation to the next. Each telling carries with it the weight of fear and fascination, for the Boggart is a creature that leaves an indelible mark on those who encounter it. Among the many legends that have survived the passage of time, a few stand out, etched into the memory of the land like scars. One of the most famous Boggart tales hails from the windswept moors of Lancashire, where a family was tormented by a Boggart so malevolent that it became the stuff of nightmares. The family had lived peacefully in their farmhouse for years, until one day, a strange feeling settled over the place, a sense that something was watching, waiting. It began with small things, doors creaking open in the middle of the night, objects moving on their own, whispers that seemed to come from the walls. The family tried to dismiss it as their imagination, but the disturbances grew bolder. The Boggart seemed to delight in causing havoc, pulling the bed covers off as they slept, pinching them until they bruised, and turning their peaceful home into a place of terror. The children were especially frightened, for they would often wake in the night to find the Boggart sitting at the foot of their beds, its eyes glowing in the darkness. They could feel its breath on their faces, hear its low, menacing chuckle as it watched them. The parents tried to comfort them, but the Boggart's presence was relentless. Desperate to rid themselves of the creature, the family sought the help of a local wise woman, who advised them to leave the house and move far away, taking everything they owned with them. The family packed their belongings and loaded them onto a cart, relieved to be leaving the nightmare behind. But as they traveled down the road, they heard a voice call out from one of the sacks on the cart. "I'm with you," it said, and their hearts sank with dread. The Boggart had followed them, and there was no escaping it. The legend says that the family was never able to rid themselves of the Boggart, and it haunted them for the rest of their days. In another tale, this time from Yorkshire, a farmer known for his stubbornness came face to face with a boggart that took residence in his barn. The farmer was a man who feared nothing, not man nor beast, and when he first encountered the boggart, he treated it with disdain. He laughed off the strange noises in the night, the sudden chill that filled the barn, and even the cattle that were found trembling in their stalls each morning. But the boggart was not one to be ignored. One night, the farmer awoke to find the boggart standing at the foot of his bed, its form shifting in the shadows. It was not a large creature, but there was something about its presence that filled the room with a sense of dread. The boggart spoke to the farmer in a voice that was both ancient and childlike, telling him that he had angered it with his arrogance and that it would not leave him in peace. The farmer, determined to stand his ground, challenged the boggart, telling it that he would not be driven from his home by a mere trickster. The boggart's response was swift and brutal. It began to torment the farmer in ways that drove him to the edge of madness. It soured the milk from his cows, spoiled the crops in his fields, and made his life a living hell. The once proud man was reduced to a shadow of his former self, pleading with the boggart to leave him in peace. But the boggart would not relent, and the farmer eventually abandoned his home, leaving behind everything he had worked for. The barn, now empty and forsaken, was said to be haunted by the boggart for years to come, a place where no one dared to venture. Another legend speaks of a boggart that haunted a mill in the heart of Derbyshire. The miller, a kind and hard-working man, had always been wary of the stories of boggarts, but he had never encountered one himself. That was until a boggart took up residence in his mill, causing the wheels to stop turning, the grain to spill, and the flour to sour. The miller, who had a young family to feed, was desperate to rid his mill of the creature. He sought the advice of a local blacksmith, who was known for his knowledge of the supernatural. The blacksmith told the miller that the only way to banish the boggart was to trap it in a bottle and throw it into a river, where it would be carried away by the current. The miller, with trembling hands, did as he was told. He laid out a trap for the boggart, baiting it with a bottle of the finest wine. That night, as the boggart moved through the mill, causing its usual havoc, it found the bottle and, curious, entered it. The miller, who had been hiding nearby, quickly sealed the bottle and ran to the river. He hurled the bottle into the rushing water, watching as it was swept away. The miller returned to his mill, hopeful that his troubles were over. And indeed, the boggart was never seen again, and the miller's life returned to normal. But the legend warns that if the bottle is ever found and opened, the boggart will be free to continue its mischief once more. These stories, passed down through the ages, have kept the memory of the boggart alive in the hearts of those who hear them. Each tale is a reminder of the things that lurk in the shadows, the creatures that defy explanation, and the fear that they can bring. The boggart, with its malevolent presence, has become a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that there are forces in the world that cannot be controlled, only feared. And as long as these stories are told, the boggart will continue to haunt the dark corners of the world, waiting for its next victim. The sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the fields, and in those moments between day and night, the villagers would draw close to the warmth of their hearths. It was in this twilight that the stories of boggarts came to life, carried on the breath of old farmers and whispered to the young ones with a seriousness that left them wide-eyed. In these small rural communities, where the boundary between the known and the unknown felt thin, the presence of a boggart was not just a tale but a truth woven into the fabric of daily life. In the quiet countryside, where every creak of the floorboard and rustle of the wind could be something more, the boggart was a constant, lurking just beyond the flickering firelight. It was a presence felt rather than seen, a force that influenced the rhythms of life in ways both subtle and profound. For the people of these villages, the boggart was not a mere legend, but a creature that shaped their days and nights, a being that could not be ignored. The boggart was known to be a trickster, a creature that thrived on mischief and chaos. It would make its home in the barns, the cellars, or the dark corners of the house, places where the light of day rarely reached. The villagers would often find themselves at the mercy of its whims. A tool misplaced, a door that refused to stay shut, or milk that soured overnight, these were signs that a boggart had taken up residence. The adults spoke of these occurrences with a mix of frustration and resignation, knowing that once a boggart decided to stay, there was little that could be done to make it leave. For the farmers, the boggart was a source of endless vexation. They would wake to find their horses in a lather, as if they had been ridden hard through the night, or discover that their cows had been mysteriously untied and left to wander the fields. Crops would fail for no apparent reason, tools would break just when they were needed most, and the livestock would become restless, their eyes wide with fear as if they sensed something unseen. These were not coincidences, but the handiwork of the boggart, a creature that thrived on turning the ordinary into the inexplicable. But it wasn't just the farmers who felt the boggart's presence. The women of the village, who tended to the homes and the hearths, would often find themselves at odds with the creature. A loaf of bread that refused to rise, a broom that snapped in two, or a wash that never seemed to dry, these were the boggart's ways of making itself known. Children, too, were not immune to its tricks. They would wake in the night to find their toys scattered across the floor, their blankets pulled away, or feel a cold breath on their necks as they lay in bed. The boggart's laughter, soft and cruel, would echo in the stillness, leaving them trembling in the dark. Yet, for all the fear and frustration it caused, the boggart was also a part of the community, an entity that the villagers had learned to live with, much like the unpredictable weather or the cycles of the moon. It was said that to anger a boggart was to invite disaster, so the villagers treated it with a wary respect. They would leave offerings of bread and milk in the corners of their homes or barns, hoping to placate the creature and keep its mischief to a minimum. These offerings were made with the same care and attention as any other task, for the boggart's favor, or at least its neutrality, was something to be valued. In some cases, the boggart's presence was even seen as a form of protection. While it might cause trouble, it was also believed to ward off other, more malevolent spirits. A house with a boggart, some said, was less likely to be troubled by witches or other dark forces. This duality made the boggart a complex figure in the minds of the villagers, both a nuisance and a guardian, a creature to be feared and respected in equal measure. The stories of boggarts were passed down from generation to generation, each tale adding to the lore and shaping the way the villagers understood the world around them. These stories were not just for the children but were shared among the adults as well, reinforcing the sense of community and the shared understanding of the unseen forces that influenced their lives. The boggart was a reminder that the world was full of mysteries, that not everything could be explained or controlled, and that sometimes the best one could do was to adapt and endure. As the years passed, and the modern world began to encroach on these rural communities, the stories of boggarts started to fade. Electricity banished the shadows, machines replaced the old tools, and the once isolated villages became connected to the broader world. But even as the tales of boggarts became less frequent, their impact lingered. The older generation would still speak of them on cold winter nights, their voices hushed and reverent, as if to invoke the presence of the creature one last time. For the children, these stories became a link to the past, a way to connect with the lives of those who had come before them. They might not have believed in boggarts with the same certainty as their grandparents, but the tales held a certain power, a reminder of a time when the world was a little more mysterious, a little less certain. And in those moments, as the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, the boggart lived on, a shadow in the corner of the room, a rustle in the dark, a presence that could not be entirely forgotten. Even today, in the far corners of the countryside, where the old ways still hold some sway, the boggart remains a figure of caution and wonder. Its influence may have waned, but it has not entirely disappeared. For those who listen closely, who pay attention to the creaks and groans of an old house, who feel the chill of an unexpected breeze, the boggart is still there, watching, waiting, ready to remind the world that it is never truly alone. And in that quiet recognition, the bond between the boggart and the people endures, a thread that connects the present to a past filled with shadows and secrets, a past where the boggart was both feared and accepted as part of the everyday fabric of life. There's a chill in the air, the kind that settles deep in your bones, making the warmth of the hearth all the more inviting. Yet, even as the fire crackles and the room is filled with the comforting sense of home, there's an uneasy feeling that something isn't quite right. The door creaks when no one is near, the floorboards groan under an invisible weight, and shadows seem to stretch a little too far. The household, once a place of safety and comfort, now feels different, as if an unseen presence is lurking in the corners. This is the work of the Boggart, a creature that thrives on mischief and fear, turning the familiar into something unsettling and strange. Boggarts were said to be drawn to homes, especially those with a history of trouble or sorrow. They would slip in unnoticed, finding a dark corner or a forgotten space to settle in. Once inside, the Boggart would make itself at home, but its presence was far from comforting. The atmosphere in the house would change, subtle at first, but soon impossible to ignore. Objects would move on their own, disappearing from one place only to reappear in another. Doors would slam shut without warning, and strange noises would echo through the halls at night. These disturbances were not just random occurrences, they were the deliberate acts of a Boggart, a creature that took delight in unsettling the lives of those around it. The fear that a Boggart could instill in a household was profound. It wasn't just the physical disturbances that caused unease, but the creeping sense that something malevolent was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Children were particularly sensitive to the presence of a Boggart, often waking in the night with tales of dark figures lurking in the shadows or cold hands brushing against their skin. Their cries would echo through the house, sending shivers down the spines of their parents, who knew that comforting words and warm blankets could do little to keep the Boggart at bay. In the dead of night, when the world outside was silent and still, the Boggart would become most active. It would knock on walls, scratch at doors, and let out low, guttural sounds that made the blood run cold. The family would lie awake, listening, hearts pounding as they tried to ignore the growing sense of dread. The darkness seemed to press in from all sides, and the once familiar shapes of the room took on new, frightening forms. Sleep was elusive, and when it did come, it was filled with nightmares that left the dreamer waking in a cold sweat. But the Boggart wasn't just a creature of the night. It could cause mischief during the day as well, reminding the household of its presence with little acts of chaos. Pots would clatter to the floor, windows would suddenly burst open, and objects would go missing, only to turn up in the most unlikely places. The milk would sour overnight, bread would burn, and food would spoil with alarming frequency. These disruptions made even the most mundane tasks fraught with tension, as the family never knew when the Boggart might strike next. There were stories of Boggarts that grew more aggressive over time, their pranks escalating into something far more dangerous. Fires would start without explanation, valuable items would be smashed, and livestock would be found dead in the morning. The family, already on edge, would find themselves living in constant fear, unsure of what the Boggart might do next. Some even believed that a particularly vengeful Boggart could cause illness or death, its malevolent energy seeping into the very fabric of the household. In an attempt to rid their homes of the Boggart, families would try a variety of methods. Some would offer food and drink, hoping to appease the creature and convince it to move on. Others would hang protective charms above doorways or burn herbs to cleanse the air. Yet, the Boggart was a stubborn being, and once it had made a place its home, it was nearly impossible to drive it away. Even when a family would leave, abandoning their house in the hopes of escaping the Boggart's torment, there were tales of the creature following them to their new home, its presence a constant reminder that there was no true escape. The psychological toll of living with a Boggart was immense. The fear and anxiety it caused could drive a family to the brink of despair, their once happy home turned into a place of dread. The sense of powerlessness, of being at the mercy of an unseen force, was overwhelming. Even the most rational minds could not dismiss the feeling that something unnatural was at work, something beyond their control. The Boggart thrived on this fear, feeding off the energy of the household, growing stronger with each passing day. Yet, despite the terror it brought, the Boggart was also a part of the household story. It was woven into the fabric of their lives, a shadow that loomed over their daily existence. The stories of Boggarts were passed down through generations, each family adding their own experiences to the lore. These tales were shared with a mix of fear and fascination, a reminder that even in the safety of one's home, the unknown could still find a way in. The Boggart's ability to inhabit a home and sow chaos made it one of the most feared creatures in English folklore. It was not just a monster of the imagination, but a real and present danger, a force that could turn a place of comfort into a nightmare. For those who lived in constant awareness of the Boggarts' presence, life became a delicate balance between fear and survival as they tried to carry on in the face of an enemy they could not see, but whose impact they felt every day. The Boggart was a reminder that, in the quietest corners of our lives, something dark and ancient could still linger, waiting for the moment to strike. There's a haunting stillness in the heart of the forest, a silence that whispers of something ancient and unseen. The trees, with their gnarled roots and twisted branches, seem to watch with an unnerving intent, their shadows stretching long and dark across the forest floor. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of trickling water echoes faintly. It is in these forgotten places, where the light barely reaches and the silence feels alive, that the Boggarts are said to dwell. These creatures of folklore are not bound by the walls of a home but roam freely in the wild, untamed parts of the world. The idea of Boggarts residing in nature adds another layer of fear, for in the wilderness, humans are out of their element, vulnerable to the whims of these unseen beings. The forest, once a place of beauty and life, takes on a more sinister character when it becomes the domain of a Boggart. The rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs, the sudden gusts of wind that seem to come from nowhere, each of these can be a sign that a Boggart is near, watching and waiting. In the dense thickets of the forest, where the trees grow close together and the underbrush is thick with brambles, the Boggart finds its perfect hiding places. These creatures are said to be masters of disguise, blending in with their surroundings so completely that even the most seasoned hunter might pass by without noticing. But those who do sense their presence often speak of a creeping dread, a feeling that they are not alone, even when no one else is visible. The forest, with its endless shadows and hidden corners, becomes a labyrinth of fear, where every step could lead closer to an encounter with the unknown. Marshes, with their murky waters and treacherous footing, are another favorite haunt of the Boggart. These wetlands, often shrouded in mist and filled with the sounds of unseen creatures, have long been associated with danger and mystery. The ground beneath one's feet feels unstable, as if it might give way at any moment, and the air is thick with the smell of stagnant water. In such a place, where visibility is low and every step is uncertain, the presence of a Boggart can be overwhelming. The creature is said to lurk in the shadows, just out of sight, its malevolent gaze fixed on those who dare to venture too close. Stories tell of travelers who, while crossing a marsh at dusk, heard strange noises, low growls, eerie laughter, or the sound of footsteps that didn't match their own. These sounds would follow them, growing louder and more insistent, until they were convinced that something was chasing them. Panic would set in, causing them to lose their way in the dense fog, their hearts pounding as they stumbled through the dark, wet landscape. Some would find their way out, breathless and shaken, while others were never seen again, their fate a mystery that only the marsh and the Boggart knew. Caves, too, are said to be the lairs of Boggarts. These dark, echoing chambers, hidden deep within the earth, have always held a fascination for humans, yet they are places where few dare to tread. The entrance to a cave, often small and unassuming, leads into a world of darkness where the light of day never reaches. Inside, the air is cold and damp, and the walls seem to close in as one ventures further. The silence is complete, save for the occasional drip of water or the distant sound of wind howling through the tunnels. It is here, in the blackness of the earth, that the Boggart feels most at home. Cave explorers have recounted tales of eerie experiences, voices that seem to come from nowhere, the feeling of being watched, or the sudden drop in temperature that sent shivers down their spines. Some spoke of strange, almost human-like figures glimpsed out of the corner of their eyes, only to vanish when they turned to look. Others described the sensation of something brushing against them in the dark, a cold, clammy touch that left them paralyzed with fear. These encounters, though fleeting, were enough to convince many that the caves were not empty, that something ancient and malevolent lived within their depths. The idea of Boggarts in natural environments speaks to a primal fear that lies deep within the human psyche, the fear of the unknown, of the wild places that remain untouched by human hands. In these places, where the rules of civilization no longer apply, the Boggart reigns supreme. It is a creature of chaos and fear, thriving in the untamed wilderness where it can manipulate the environment to its advantage. The forest, the marsh, the cave, each of these is transformed in the presence of a Boggart, becoming a place of danger where the familiar rules no longer apply. For those who lived near these wild places, the knowledge that a Boggart might be lurking nearby was a source of constant unease. Children were warned to stay away from the forest at night, to avoid the marshes after a rain, and never to enter a cave alone. The stories of those who had encountered Boggarts were passed down through generations, each telling adding to the fear and mystery that surrounded these creatures. Even the bravest among them would hesitate before venturing too far into the wilderness, knowing that once they crossed the threshold into the Boggarts' domain, they were at the mercy of forces they could not see or understand. The Boggart in nature is a reminder that there are places in this world that remain beyond our control, where the wild and the untamed still hold sway. It is a symbol of the fear that comes with venturing into the unknown, of the dangers that lurk in the shadows of the natural world. Whether in the depths of the forest, the murky waters of the marsh, or the dark recesses of a cave, the Boggart is always waiting, a reminder that in the wild places of the earth, we are never truly alone. The chill in the air was palpable as the villagers gathered under the ancient oak tree, its twisted branches stretching out like the gnarled fingers of a giant. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced eerily in the fading light. There was a sense of urgency, a shared fear that united them all. Whispers filled the night, tales of a Boggart that had begun to haunt the edges of the village, its malevolent presence growing stronger with each passing day. The time had come to act, to protect their homes and loved ones from the unseen terror that lurked in the darkness. In those moments of desperation, when the fear of a Boggart gripped a community, people turned to rituals passed down through generations, rituals steeped in the belief that they could keep the malevolent spirits at bay. These rituals were not just acts of superstition, they were born out of the deep, primal need to protect what was most precious. The elders, keepers of ancient knowledge, would lead the way, their voices steady but laced with the same fear that gnawed at everyone's hearts. One of the most common practices involved the use of salt, a substance long believed to have purifying properties. Villagers would sprinkle salt across the thresholds of their homes, a line that no Boggart could cross. The act of laying down the salt was more than just a practical measure, it was a ritual that connected them to their ancestors, who had done the same in times of need. As the white grain scattered on the ground, there was a collective sigh of relief, a hope that this simple act would be enough to keep the darkness at bay. In some communities, iron was believed to hold protective power. It was said that Boggarts, like many supernatural beings, were repelled by the cold touch of iron. Families would hang iron horseshoes above their doors, the metal gleaming dully in the dim light. The shape of the horseshoe, often with its open end pointing upwards, was meant to trap the evil within, preventing it from entering the home. The horseshoe was more than just a symbol, it was a talisman, a physical embodiment of their hope and determination to protect their loved ones from harm. But sometimes, these simple protections were not enough, and the villagers would resort to more elaborate rituals. There were tales of a mysterious circle that could be drawn to trap a Boggart. This circle, traced in the dirt or drawn on the floor with chalk, had to be created with utmost care. Every line had to be perfect, every curve precise, for the smallest mistake could render the ritual useless. The act of drawing the circle was often accompanied by prayers or incantations, whispered words that carried the weight of centuries of belief. Once the circle was complete, it was said that the Boggart could be summoned into it, trapped within its bounds until it could be banished or dealt with. In some regions, people believed that the power of words could protect them from a Boggart's wrath. They would inscribe certain phrases or symbols on their doors and windows, marks that were thought to hold magical power. These inscriptions, often written in languages long forgotten by most, were passed down from generation to generation. The act of writing them was a solemn one, done with great care and reverence, for the words themselves were believed to hold the power to ward off evil. The symbols would glow faintly in the moonlight, a silent guardian watching over the household through the darkest hours of the night. Another ritual involved the use of a mirror, a common object that took on a new significance in the fight against the Boggart. Mirrors were believed to have the power to reflect evil, to send it back where it came from. A mirror would be placed facing the door, its reflective surface waiting to catch the image of the Boggart as it tried to enter. The theory was simple: if the Boggart saw its reflection, it would be so startled by the sight of itself that it would flee. The mirror, usually covered during the day, would be uncovered at night, its polished surface gleaming in the darkness, ready to protect those within. Some believed that the sound of bells could drive away a Boggart. These were not just any bells, but ones that had been blessed or consecrated. The ringing of these bells was said to fill the air with a pure sound, a sound that no malevolent spirit could withstand. Families would hang these bells in their homes, on doors or windows, so that the slightest movement would set them ringing. The sound would carry through the night, a gentle chime that brought comfort to those who heard it, a reassurance that they were not defenseless against the unseen forces that threatened them. For those who felt that their homes had already been invaded by a Boggart, there was a more drastic measure: moving house. It was believed that a Boggart would attach itself to a particular location, and by abandoning that place, one could escape its influence. However, this was not a decision made lightly, as leaving behind one's home was a difficult and often painful choice. The act of moving was seen as a last resort, a final attempt to free oneself from the terror that had taken root in the home. Families would leave behind everything they could not carry, the hope being that the Boggart would stay with the house and not follow them to their new abode. In times of great fear, communities would come together to perform rituals as a collective. These were often elaborate ceremonies, involving the entire village or town. Bonfires would be lit, and offerings would be made to placate the spirits. The air would be thick with the scent of burning herbs, believed to cleanse the area of any malevolent presence. Songs and chants would fill the night, the voices of the community rising together in an effort to drive away the darkness. The ritual would continue until the first light of dawn, when the sun's rays would bring a sense of relief, a hope that the Boggart had been banished for good. These rituals, varied and numerous, were all born out of a deep-seated fear and a desperate need for protection. Each one was a small act of defiance against the unseen forces that threatened to disrupt their lives. They were a way for people to take control in a world where so much was beyond their understanding. The belief in these rituals, the faith that they could keep the Boggart at bay, was a source of comfort in dark times, a way to find strength in the face of fear. In the flickering candlelight of an old, dusty library, the pages of forgotten books whisper tales of fear and wonder. These stories, etched in ink centuries ago, hold within them the shadowy figure of the Boggart, a creature as elusive as it is terrifying. With every turn of the page, the Boggart seems to step out of the shadows, its presence felt even when it remains unseen. Literature, with its power to immortalize the fears and imaginations of generations, has given the Boggart a life far beyond the fireside tales of rural England. The first time the Boggart appeared in written form, it was more than just a creature, it was a symbol of the unknown, of the fears that lurk in the corners of our minds. Writers of the time captured the essence of this terror, describing the Boggart as a figure that could not be easily defined, its shape shifting with every telling. The Boggart was not just one thing, it was the embodiment of all that haunted the human spirit, an ever-changing presence that thrived on fear and doubt. The words on the page seemed to breathe life into the creature, making it all the more real to those who dared to read about it. As the centuries passed, the Boggart found its way into more and more stories, each author adding their own twist to the legend. In some tales, the Boggart was a mischievous spirit, playing tricks on unsuspecting villagers and causing chaos wherever it went. In others, it was a malevolent force, lurking in the darkness, waiting to pounce on those who dared to venture too close. The Boggart became a reflection of the fears of the time, whether it was the fear of the unknown, the fear of the dark, or the fear of losing control. Each story added another layer to the Boggart's character, making it both more mysterious and more terrifying. One of the most famous depictions of the Boggart in literature comes from the works of the 19th century English writers, who were captivated by the folklore of the countryside. These authors wove the Boggart into their stories, using it to explore the darker side of human nature. In these tales, the Boggart was often a symbol of repressed emotions, of the anger and fear that people tried to hide but could never truly escape. The Boggart became a metaphor for the inner demons that everyone carries with them, lurking just beneath the surface, ready to emerge when least expected. In some stories, the Boggart was portrayed as a creature of tragedy, a being that was once human but had been twisted and deformed by years of isolation and fear. These tales painted the Boggart in a more sympathetic light, suggesting that it was not born evil but had become so through no fault of its own. The Boggart's loneliness and pain were palpable, and readers could not help but feel a pang of sorrow for the creature, even as they feared it. These stories highlighted the idea that the Boggart was not just a monster, but a reflection of the darker aspects of humanity itself. As the Boggart continued to appear in literature, its character became more complex, more nuanced. It was no longer just a creature of fear, but a symbol of the unknown, of the mysteries that lie beyond the edge of our understanding. The Boggart became a way for writers to explore the boundaries of reality, to question what is real and what is imagined. In some stories, the Boggart was a figment of the imagination, a product of the mind's darkest fears. In others, it was a real and tangible presence, a creature that could not be ignored or denied. The Boggart became a way for writers to explore the nature of fear itself, to ask what it is that makes us afraid and why. The Boggart's influence can be seen in the works of some of the greatest English writers, from Shakespeare to Dickens. In Shakespeare's plays, the Boggart is hinted at, a shadowy figure that haunts the edges of the stage, never fully seen but always felt. In Dickens's novels, the Boggart becomes a symbol of the fears and anxieties of the Victorian era, a reflection of the dark and dangerous world that lay just beyond the safety of the hearth and home. The Boggart was a way for these writers to tap into the collective fears of their time, to give voice to the anxieties that plagued their readers. In more recent literature, the Boggart has continued to evolve, taking on new forms and meanings. In some modern tales, the Boggart is a creature of the supernatural, a being that defies explanation and challenges the boundaries of reality. In others, it is a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that there are still mysteries in the world that we cannot fully understand. The Boggart has become a way for writers to explore the human experience, to delve into the depths of the psyche, and to confront the fears that lie hidden there. Even today, the Boggart continues to inspire writers, its presence felt in the pages of books, the lines of poems, and the words of stories told around the fire. The Boggart is a creature that refuses to be forgotten, its shadowy figure haunting the corners of our minds and the pages of our books. It is a reminder that fear is a powerful force, one that can shape our lives and our stories in ways that we cannot always predict or control. The Boggart is a symbol of the unknown, of the mysteries that still elude us, and of the power of the imagination to bring those mysteries to life. As long as there are stories to be told, the Boggart will continue to exist, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. It is a creature that has transcended time and place, its influence felt in every corner of English literature. The Boggart is a reminder that fear is not just a product of the mind, but a force that can shape our reality, that can turn the ordinary into the extraordinary, and that can make even the most familiar places seem strange and terrifying. The Boggart is a creature of the night, a being that thrives in the darkness, and that will continue to haunt the pages of our books for generations to come. As the flickering light of a hearth cast long shadows on the walls of a small, humble cottage, families would gather, eyes wide with anticipation. The elders, with voices steeped in the wisdom of years, would lean in close, and in a hushed tone, they would speak of the Boggart. The stories, passed down through generations, held the power to send shivers down the spine, to make the heart race, and to ignite the imagination in ways that no written word ever could. In these moments, the Boggart was not just a tale but a presence, a shadow that lurked just beyond the safety of the firelight. Oral tradition, with its roots deep in the soil of human history, was the lifeblood that kept the Boggart alive. Long before the written word became the keeper of stories, these legends were carried on the breath of those who had seen and heard more than they could explain. The spoken word was powerful. It breathed life into the Boggart, allowing it to slip from the lips of the storyteller into the minds of the listeners, where it would take root and grow. Each retelling was a rebirth, with the Boggart taking on new shapes, new faces, and new terrors, molded by the fears and imaginations of each generation. These stories were often told in the dark of night when the world outside the cottage walls was cloaked in mystery. The wind would howl, the branches of trees would creak, and every sound would seem to carry a hint of the Boggart's presence. Children would huddle close to their parents, their eyes wide, their hearts pounding as the tale unfolded. They could almost feel the Boggart's breath on the back of their necks, hear its soft footsteps just beyond the edge of the light. The storyteller's voice would rise and fall, drawing the listeners in, making them feel as though they, too, were part of the tale, living it, breathing it, fearing it. In these moments, the Boggart was more than just a story. It was a shared experience, a bond that connected the listeners to each other and to those who had come before them. The tales of the Boggart were not just passed down, they were passed around, each person adding their own twist, their own detail, until the Boggart became a reflection of the community's collective fears and beliefs. The stories were a way of understanding the world, of making sense of the inexplicable, and of teaching lessons that were as old as the hills. The power of oral tradition lay in its immediacy, in the way the words could be shaped and reshaped, adapted to the audience and the moment. A skilled storyteller could make the Boggart as real as the wind outside, as tangible as the cold creeping into the room. They could make the listeners feel the weight of the Boggart's gaze, the chill of its touch, and the dread of knowing that it was out there, somewhere, waiting. The Boggart was a living, breathing entity, not just in the stories, but in the minds of those who heard them. It was a part of the world they lived in, a force that could not be ignored or dismissed. The stories of the Boggart spread from village to village, carried by travelers, merchants, and wandering storytellers. Each new telling brought with it new details, new twists, as the Boggart adapted to its new surroundings. In one village, the Boggart might be a mischievous trickster, stealing bread and hiding tools. In another, it might be a malevolent spirit, haunting the fields and scaring the livestock. The Boggart was as fluid as the words that described it, changing with the landscape, the culture, and the times. Yet, no matter where it went, the core of the Boggart remained the same, a creature of fear, of the unknown, and of the night. The oral tradition was also a way of preserving the memory of those who had come before. The stories of the Boggart were intertwined with the history of the people who told them. The tales would often mention names, places, and events that had long since passed into memory, keeping them alive in the minds of the listeners. The Boggart was a link to the past, a way of remembering the old ways, the old fears, and the old beliefs. It was a reminder that, no matter how much the world changed, some things would always remain the same: the fear of the dark, the fear of the unknown, and the need to make sense of it all. The Boggart was also a tool for teaching, for instilling values and lessons in the younger generation. The stories would often have a moral, a lesson hidden within the tale. The Boggart might be used to teach children to respect the power of nature, to be wary of strangers, or to obey their elders. The tales were a way of passing on the wisdom of the ages, of teaching the next generation how to survive in a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. The Boggart was a symbol of the dangers that lay in wait, but also of the strength and resilience needed to face them. As the years passed, and the written word began to take hold, the Boggart started to find its way into books and manuscripts. Yet, even as it was captured in ink, the Boggart remained a creature of the spoken word. The written stories could never quite capture the same sense of immediacy, of fear, that came from hearing the tale told aloud. The Boggart was a creature of the night, of the flickering firelight and the whispered words. It lived in the spaces between the lines, in the pauses and the silences, in the breathless anticipation of the listeners. Oral tradition was the lifeblood of the Boggart, the force that kept it alive and thriving for generations. The stories were more than just entertainment. They were a way of connecting to the past, of understanding the present, and of preparing for the future. The Boggart was a reminder that, no matter how much the world changed, some things would always remain the same: the fear of the unknown, the power of the imagination, and the need to tell stories that could bring those fears to life. Even now, in a world of screens and digital words, the Boggart lives on, passed down from one storyteller to the next, each adding their own voice to the tale. The Boggart is a testament to the power of oral tradition, to the way stories can shape and define a culture, and to the enduring human need to share those stories. The Boggart is more than just a creature of folklore. It is a symbol of the way we make sense of the world, of the way we confront our fears, and of the way we pass those lessons on to the next generation. In the dim glow of a theater, as the screen flickers to life, a shadow moves across the scene. It's something small, almost imperceptible at first, but then it grows, becoming a shape, a whisper of darkness that sends chills down the spine. The audience, seated in rows, leans in, their breath caught in their throats. The Boggart has found its way into modern media, slipping from the pages of old tales into the bright, unforgiving light of contemporary storytelling. The Boggart, a creature of ancient fears and whispered legends, has taken on new forms in the world of film, television, and books. It has crept into the minds of writers and directors, finding a place in stories that resonate with today's audiences. But even as it enters this new world, it brings with it the weight of centuries of fear, the kind that lingers long after the credits roll or the book is closed. In movies, the Boggart is often portrayed as a creature of pure terror, a manifestation of our deepest fears. It lurks in the shadows, waiting to strike when least expected. The Boggart doesn't need a clear shape or form, its power lies in its ability to become whatever the mind fears most. It is the monster under the bed, the figure in the dark corner, the inexplicable chill that runs down the spine. The terror of the Boggart is not in what it is, but in what it could be. Directors use this to their advantage, crafting scenes that play on the audience's imagination, letting them fill in the blanks with their own fears. But the Boggart is not just a creature of fear. It is also a symbol of the unknown, of the things that we cannot control or understand. In television shows, it often appears as a trickster, a being that thrives on chaos and confusion. It might play pranks, cause mischief, or lead characters astray, but always with a sense of something darker lurking beneath the surface. The Boggart's unpredictability keeps audiences on edge, never quite sure what will happen next. It's this uncertainty that makes the Boggart such a compelling figure in modern storytelling. It represents the chaos that lies just beyond the edges of our carefully ordered lives. In books, the Boggart has been given new depth, its character explored in ways that were impossible in the oral traditions of old. Writers have delved into the psychology of the Boggart, examining what it means to be a creature of fear. Some stories portray the Boggart as a misunderstood being, trapped by its own nature, feared and hated for something it cannot control. Others cast it as a villain, an embodiment of the darkest parts of the human soul. The Boggart becomes a mirror, reflecting the fears and desires of those who encounter it. Through these stories, the Boggart continues to evolve, taking on new meanings and resonating with new generations. Even as the Boggart finds its place in modern media, it retains a connection to its roots. The fear that the Boggart inspires is timeless, a reflection of the primal fears that have haunted humanity for centuries. It taps into something deep within us, something that has been passed down through generations. The Boggart in a film or a book might be a product of modern storytelling, but the fear it evokes is as old as the tales told around the fire on a cold, dark night. And yet, the Boggart has also become something more. In the hands of modern creators, it has taken on a new life, becoming a symbol of the power of fear and the power to overcome it. In some stories, the Boggart is defeated, not by force, but by understanding. Characters learn to face their fears, to confront the darkness within themselves, and in doing so, they strip the Boggart of its power. These stories offer a sense of hope, a reminder that the things we fear most are often the things we understand least. By shining a light on the Boggart, modern storytellers remind us that fear, while powerful, is not invincible. The Boggart's presence in contemporary media also speaks to the enduring power of folklore. Even in a world of advanced technology and endless information, the old stories still hold sway. The Boggart, with its roots in the oral traditions of rural England, has found a new home in the digital age. It has been reimagined, reinterpreted, and brought to life in ways that the storytellers of old could never have imagined. Yet, at its core, the Boggart remains the same, a creature born of fear, living in the shadows, waiting for the moment when the light dims and the imagination takes over. In many ways, the Boggart's journey into modern media mirrors our own journey into the unknown. As we venture into new worlds, be it through film, television, or literature, we carry with us the fears and uncertainties of the past. The Boggart is a reminder that no matter how far we go, there will always be shadows at the edges of the light, places where the unknown still holds sway. But it also reminds us that we have the power to face those fears, to turn the unknown into something we can understand, and in doing so, to take away its power. The Boggart in modern media is a testament to the enduring power of storytelling. It shows how the stories of the past can find new life in the present, how the fears of old can resonate with new generations. Whether it's in the flicker of a film screen, the pages of a book, or the scenes of a television show, the Boggart continues to haunt, to terrify, and to captivate. It is a creature of the imagination, born of the fears that lie within us all, and it will continue to live as long as there are stories to be told and fears to be faced. In the quiet corners of old cottages, where the flicker of the hearth casts long shadows on the walls, the stories of Boggarts were whispered to children as the night deepened. These tales weren't just stories, they were warnings, meant to keep little ones safe from the dangers lurking in the dark. The Boggart was more than a creature of fear, it was a lesson, a guide for children to navigate the treacherous paths of life with caution. The relationship between children and Boggart legends was complex, filled with both terror and fascination. Parents would speak of the Boggart with a tone that was half serious, half playful, but the underlying message was clear. The Boggart was the embodiment of all the things that could go wrong if a child strayed too far from safety. It was the mischief maker, the trouble bringer, the one who would come if rules were broken. And children, with their vivid imaginations, could see the Boggart in every creak of the floorboard, every rustle in the bushes, every unexplained noise in the night. The fear of the Boggart was a fear that came with a purpose. It wasn't just about keeping children in line, it was about teaching them the realities of the world in a way they could understand. The Boggart was the unknown, the danger that could be anywhere, at any time. It taught children to be cautious, to think before they acted, to stay close to home where it was safe. In a world where dangers were real and often close at hand, these lessons were vital. But the Boggart also had another role, a role that was more about understanding fear than simply avoiding danger. By giving shape to the Boggart, parents helped their children confront the things that scared them. The Boggart was the darkness under the bed, the strange noises in the night, the fears that children didn't quite understand. By turning these fears into a creature that could be named, described, and even outwitted, children learned that fear wasn't something to run from, but something to face. There were stories of children who, with bravery or cleverness, managed to trick or escape the Boggart. These tales were just as important as the ones filled with caution. They gave children hope, a sense of control in a world that often seemed vast and frightening. If a child could outsmart a Boggart, then maybe they could handle the real-world dangers that awaited them as they grew. The Boggart was also a way for parents to explain the unexplainable. When things went wrong, when toys went missing, when food disappeared, when odd things happened around the house, it was easy to blame the Boggart. For children, this made the world a little less scary. If a Boggart was to blame, then it wasn't their fault, and it wasn't something they had to face alone. It was a shared experience, something that brought families together in their efforts to keep the Boggart at bay. But even as the Boggart served these purposes, it was still a creature of fear, and that fear was very real to the children who heard the stories. The Boggart could be anywhere, in the dark corners of the room, in the shadowy woods, in the cold, damp places where light rarely touched. It could take many forms, each more terrifying than the last. The very uncertainty of the Boggart made it more frightening, because children knew that it could be anything, and that it could be watching them at any moment. Yet, despite the fear, or perhaps because of it, children were drawn to Boggart stories. They would listen with wide eyes and bated breath, hanging on every word, even as they huddled closer to the safety of the hearth. There was something about the Boggart that captivated them, that made them want to hear more, even as they feared what they might learn. The Boggart was a puzzle, a mystery, and children, with their natural curiosity, couldn't help but be intrigued. Over time, these stories became a part of the fabric of childhood, passed down from generation to generation. Each telling brought with it new details, new twists, new ways of understanding the Boggart. Children grew up with these tales, and even as they learned to navigate the real world, the lessons of the Boggart stayed with them. The fear, the caution, the cleverness, all of these were things that they carried into adulthood, shaped by the stories they heard as children. And so, the Boggart lived on, not just as a creature of fear, but as a part of the culture, a part of the way children were taught to understand the world. It was a reminder that the world was a big, scary place, but that with the right mix of caution and courage, it was possible to face it. The Boggart was a teacher, a guide, and though it frightened children, it also prepared them for the challenges they would face as they grew. The stories of the Boggart, told in hushed tones around the fire, were more than just tales, they were lessons in disguise. They taught children that fear was something to be respected, but not something to be ruled by. They showed that the world was full of dangers, but also full of ways to overcome them. And most of all, they reminded children that even in the darkest of nights, there was always a way to keep the Boggart at bay. There's a certain chill that comes with the telling of tales about Boggarts, a fear that settles deep within, even if one doesn't fully believe. These creatures, birthed from the shadows of English folklore, have a unique hold on the human mind, and nowhere is this more evident than in their relationship with fear itself. Boggarts are the embodiment of the unknown, the creeping dread that hides just out of sight, waiting to pounce when least expected. They aren't just the monsters under the bed, they are the whispered fears that follow you through darkened woods and echo in the empty halls of old houses. In the quiet of the night, when everything is still, and the mind begins to wander, Boggarts creep into thoughts, feeding off the smallest flickers of anxiety. It is said that Boggarts are shapeshifters, able to take on the form of whatever it is that you fear most. This is where their power lies, and their ability to become your personal nightmare, to know the deepest, darkest parts of your mind and manifest them before your very eyes. A Boggart doesn't need to cause physical harm. The mere sight of it, twisted into the most terrifying shape your mind can conjure, is enough to send shivers down the spine. The fear of Boggarts wasn't just a product of overactive imaginations, it was a force that shaped the way people lived their lives. In many rural communities, tales of Boggarts were told and retold to keep children close to home and out of the dangers of the wild. These stories served as warnings, reminders of the lurking dangers that could befall anyone who strayed too far from the safety of the hearth. Parents would speak of Boggarts waiting in the dark corners of the woods, in the forgotten caves, and even in the creaking attics of their own homes. This fear was a tool, a way to instill caution in the hearts of the young and the reckless. But the power of Boggart stories went beyond mere cautionary tales. They tapped into a universal fear, the fear of the unknown. In a world where so much was left unexplained, where the line between the natural and the supernatural was often blurred, Boggarts were a way to give shape to that fear. They were the unknown made known, a way to confront the darkness by giving it a name, a face, even if that face was one of terror. And in this confrontation, there was both fear and a strange sense of comfort. To know that the fear had a form, that it could be fought or avoided, was to make it just a little less terrifying. In the collective consciousness of English society, Boggarts became a symbol of all that was feared but not understood. They were the embodiment of anxieties that had no other outlet, the fears that couldn't be explained away by logic or reason. And because of this, Boggart stories were passed down through generations, each retelling adding a new layer to the myth, each generation finding new fears to project onto these ancient creatures. The psychological impact of Boggarts was profound. For those who believed, or even half believed, the fear was real, tangible. It wasn't just a story to be told around the fire, it was a presence that could be felt in the quiet moments, in the stillness before sleep, in the darkened paths where the light of the village didn't reach. And for those who didn't believe, the stories still held a certain power. They were unsettling, a reminder of the things that go bump in the night, the things that rational minds try to dismiss but never fully can. Even as the world moved forward, as science and reason began to explain away many of the mysteries of the world, Boggarts held on. They adapted, evolving with the times, but always keeping that core element of fear. Modern depictions of Boggarts may vary, but they all tap into that same primal fear that has existed for centuries. Whether portrayed as mischievous tricksters or malevolent spirits, Boggarts continue to be a reflection of our deepest fears. And so, the fear of Boggarts remains, woven into the fabric of English folklore and culture. It's a fear that has shaped lives, influenced behaviors, and left an indelible mark on the collective psyche. Boggarts are a reminder that fear is not something that can be easily banished, it is something that lives with us, within us, shaped by our thoughts, our experiences, and our imagination. And perhaps, that is what makes Boggarts so terrifying. They are not just creatures of folklore, they are creatures of the mind, born from the very fears we cannot escape. In the dim light of a flickering candle, the whispers of old legends come to life, casting shadows that seem to dance across the walls. Among these tales, there is one that speaks of a chilling connection between Boggarts and witchcraft, a bond that intertwines fear and dark magic in a way that sends shivers down the spine. In English folklore, the link between Boggarts and witches is steeped in mystery and dread. Boggarts, those elusive and eerie creatures, were often believed to be the result of witchcraft. They were thought to be manifestations of curses or spells cast by those who practiced dark magic. The idea was simple but terrifying. A witch, harnessing malevolent powers, could summon or create a Boggart to wreak havoc on those she despised or wished to punish. The connection between Boggarts and witches wasn't just about the creatures themselves, but about the pervasive fear of the unknown. The notion that a Boggart could be a tool or a product of witchcraft added a layer of terror to the already unsettling tales. Imagine living in a small, isolated village where every unexpected creak in the night, every strange shadow in the corner of your eye, could be attributed to a witch's spell or a Boggart's mischief. The fear wasn't just in what could be seen or heard, it was in the very idea that someone with dark intentions could unleash such terror upon you. Witches, in folklore, were often portrayed as having the power to control supernatural entities. A Boggart, with its shape-shifting abilities and penchant for causing chaos, was a perfect companion for someone who sought to wield fear as a weapon. Villagers would speak of witches who, in their quest for vengeance or control, would call forth Boggarts to torment those who had wronged them. These creatures, shifting between forms and hiding in the dark, became symbols of the witch's wrath, a visible manifestation of their invisible malice. There were stories of Boggarts appearing in the homes of those who had angered a witch. These tales often involved the Boggart creating disturbances, mysterious noises, objects being moved, and unexplained accidents, making life unbearable for the afflicted. The connection between the Boggart and the witch was so strong that many people believed that even the slightest hint of witchcraft could summon a Boggart. In this sense, the fear of Boggarts was deeply intertwined with the fear of witches. To believe in one was to believe in the other, and the two became inseparable in the minds of those who lived in constant dread of the supernatural. The emotional impact of these tales was profound. Imagine the terror of knowing that someone with dark powers could turn your world upside down, turning every noise in the night into a possible sign of a Boggart's presence. The Boggart became a physical representation of the witch's power, an entity that could invade your space and unsettle your life. For those living in such fear, the mere thought of a witch casting a spell to summon a Boggart was enough to keep them awake at night, listening for the sound of footsteps or the rustle of unseen movement. The stories about witches and Boggarts served as warnings and as moral tales. They were a way for communities to make sense of the chaos and to lay blame on unseen forces. In many ways, these legends provided a framework for understanding the inexplicable. If something went wrong, if a crop failed or a child fell ill, it was easy to blame a witch's spell and the accompanying Boggart for the misfortune. The tales were not just about the supernatural, but about the very real fears and anxieties of everyday life. In some stories, witches were said to use Boggarts to frighten or manipulate people into doing their bidding. The presence of a Boggart would create a sense of constant dread, forcing people to comply with the witch's demands or face even greater horrors. The Boggart became a tool of fear, a way to exert control and dominance in a world where power was often both elusive and dangerous. The connection between Boggarts and witches is a haunting reminder of how fear can shape our understanding of the world. The idea that a witch could summon a Boggart, and that this creature could bring about such distress and disruption, added a chilling layer to the folklore. These tales, passed down through generations, reflect a deep-seated anxiety about the unknown and the supernatural, a fear that continues to resonate in the dark corners of our minds. The Boggart and the witch are forever linked in the shadows of folklore, a testament to the enduring power of fear and the lengths we go to make sense of it. In the shadowy corners of folklore, where myths twist and intertwine, the Boggart stands as a silent witness to a world of spectral fears. This elusive creature, with its uncanny ability to blend into the unseen, has not only shaped the legends around it, but has also left its eerie imprint on the folklore of other lands and creatures. Picture a world where every rustle in the dark could be the work of a boggart, its presence feared and its motives uncertain. In England, boggarts have haunted tales with their malevolent mischief, but their influence stretches beyond these shores. The boggart, with its shape-shifting abilities and knack for causing trouble, has left an indelible mark on other folklore creatures, weaving itself into a tapestry of global myths. In Scotland, for example, the boggart's traits seem to echo in the legend of the bogle. The bogle, like its English cousin, is known for its trickster behavior and unsettling presence. Its role in Scottish folklore mirrors the boggart's function, an embodiment of the unknown that lurks in the dark, ready to unsettle the unwary. The bogle, much like the boggart, causes disturbances and plays pranks, a reflection of how these creatures have evolved and influenced each other across borders. Traveling further into the realms of myth, the boggart's influence can be seen in the Scandinavian folklore of the Tomte or Nis. These creatures, small and mischievous, are akin to the boggart in their trickster nature. The Tomte, while not malevolent like the boggart, shares a similar sense of being an invisible presence that can affect the daily lives of humans. The common thread of these folklore figures highlights how the essence of the boggart, its ability to stir fear and confusion, has resonated with and shaped the mythology of different cultures. In the Irish tradition, the boggart's traits find a parallel in the leprechaun. Though the leprechaun is often portrayed as a jolly, mischievous figure rather than a malevolent spirit, its role in folklore as a troublemaker and its ability to vanish into thin air echo the boggart's own characteristics. The leprechaun's role in hiding pots of gold and creating confusion mirrors the boggart's tendency to cause disorder, showing how these mythical beings influence one another through their shared elements of trickery and mischief. Beyond Europe, the boggart's influence reaches into the folklore of the Americas. The American hobgoblin, for instance, carries a sense of the boggart's trickster spirit. Hobgoblins, like boggarts, are known for their playful yet unsettling behavior. They are creatures that, while not always harmful, have the potential to disrupt and cause unease, drawing a direct line from the boggart's own disruptive qualities. These connections reveal how the boggart, though a creature of English folklore, has become a part of a larger mythical dialogue. Its characteristics, its shape-shifting nature, its ability to cause fear and confusion, and its presence as an unseen entity have influenced and been influenced by the folklore of other cultures. The boggart story is not confined to one region but is a piece of a larger mosaic of myth, reflecting how stories and fears travel and transform across time and space. In each of these cultural reflections, the essence of the boggart, a creature that embodies the unknown and the unsettling, can be seen echoing through the folklore of other lands. The influence of the boggart stretches beyond its own mythos, leaving a haunting legacy that continues to shape and be shaped by the creatures and stories of other cultures. The boggart's mark on folklore is a testament to how universal fears and legends find common ground, blending and evolving into the myths that resonate across generations and geographies. On quiet nights, when the wind whispers through the trees and shadows dance on the walls, stories of boggart hauntings rise from the depths of old village lore. These tales, chilling and raw, recount moments when the boggart, a creature of mischief and fear, left its mark on unsuspecting communities, turning their lives into a waking nightmare. In the heart of Yorkshire, the village of Linton was once plagued by a boggart whose presence was both unseen and profoundly unsettling. Residents spoke of unexplained noises, footsteps echoing in empty rooms, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and objects that vanished only to reappear in strange places. The boggart's antics escalated from harmless pranks to more sinister acts, doors slamming shut on their own, furniture being overturned, and a persistent feeling of being watched. The villagers, gripped by a paralyzing fear, found their once peaceful homes transformed into a battleground of invisible terror. Families spoke in hushed tones of the dark figure they could never quite see but always felt, a haunting presence that seemed to leer at them from the corners of their vision. In another corner of England, the story of a boggart haunting in the village of Brindle is recounted with shivers. Here, the boggart was believed to have taken residence in an old farmhouse, where its malevolent influence turned the home into a place of dread. It began with strange sounds, a scratching at the windows, the creak of floorboards in the dead of night. As the haunting progressed, the disturbances grew more intense. Fires would start with no apparent cause, and the family's beloved livestock began to fall ill under mysterious circumstances. The once warm and inviting farmhouse became a place of palpable fear. Neighbors would report seeing shadowy figures moving in the windows, and some even claimed to have glimpsed the boggart itself, an indistinct form that seemed to shift and blend into the darkness. The psychological toll on the family was immense. They were driven to near madness by the relentless fear and the feeling of being trapped in a home that no longer belonged to them. Further north, in the village of Hutton, a boggart's reign of terror was recounted with an air of desperation. This boggart was said to have a personal vendetta against the villagers. Strange occurrences began with small, unsettling acts: food missing from larders, animals frightened without cause. As time went on, these acts of mischief grew into something darker. The villagers found their crops ruined overnight, their wells poisoned, and their livestock mutilated. Fear seeped into every corner of their lives, leaving them isolated and distrustful. They spoke of seeing a dark shape flitting through the fields and feeling an icy breath on their necks as they worked. The community was shaken to its core, their daily lives overshadowed by the persistent, invisible threat. Each story of boggart hauntings is a window into the lives of those who lived under the shadow of these malevolent creatures. The impact on the communities involved was profound. Homes became prisons of fear, once innocent activities became fraught with dread, and the simple act of living was overshadowed by the constant awareness of an unseen presence. The psychological scars left by these hauntings were as real as the physical disturbances. The fear of the boggart became a part of the community's identity, a shared trauma that bound people together even as it tore them apart. These tales of boggart hauntings illustrate not just the fear of the supernatural, but also the deep-seated anxieties that such legends can evoke. The boggart, as a creature that embodies the unknown and the unseen, taps into primal fears that resonate across generations. The stories of these hauntings serve as a reminder of how folklore can shape and reflect the fears of those who believe in it, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary and the mundane into the malevolent. The boggart's legacy is not just in the stories told, but in the very real impact it had on the lives of those who lived under its shadow. In the darkened corners of medieval England, where fear and faith intertwined, the boggart found itself entangled with the Christian church in ways that both haunted and shaped the spiritual landscape. These strange, shadowy creatures, with their mischief and menace, were not merely local legends, but became entwined with the church's efforts to understand and combat evil. Picture a village in the heart of England, where every creak of the floor and every whisper of the wind might be the boggart's doing. The church, with its ancient rituals and stern teachings, faced a challenge in reconciling these mysterious entities with its doctrine. The boggart's presence was a constant reminder of the unseen forces that roamed the world, forces that the church sought to control through faith and ritual. For many, the boggart was seen as a manifestation of malevolence, a spiritual threat that could undermine the sanctity of their homes and communities. To the clergy, these creatures were more than just frightful tales. They were symbols of the very real struggle between good and evil. In their eyes, the boggart was a demon in disguise, a test of faith meant to shake believers and challenge the power of the church. In response, the church employed a range of spiritual defenses. Exorcisms became a common practice for those plagued by these sinister beings. Priests would perform rites meant to drive out the boggart, invoking the power of God to cleanse the home of the malevolent presence. These rituals were not just acts of faith, but crucial battles against the fear that had seeped into the very fabric of daily life. The boggart was a tangible enemy that threatened to disrupt the peace and order established by the church. The church's influence extended beyond exorcisms. The boggart, as a symbol of fear and chaos, was used in sermons and teachings to reinforce the power of the divine. Clergy would recount tales of the boggart's defeat as proof of God's protection and the strength of faith. These stories, shared from the pulpit, served as both warnings and reassurances. They reminded villagers that even in the face of dark and unsettling forces, faith was their shield and salvation. However, the relationship between the boggart and the church was not always one of outright hostility. In some cases, the church recognized the Boggart as a part of the local folklore that could be used to teach moral lessons. The Boggart's antics, its pranks, and its terrifying appearances were woven into parables that illustrated the consequences of straying from the path of righteousness. These stories, while terrifying, were also meant to guide and instruct, showing how a life of virtue could protect against even the most fearsome of supernatural threats. Moreover, as the Boggart stories were passed down through generations, they evolved, sometimes merging with other folklore and religious beliefs. The Church's attempt to integrate these stories into Christian teachings led to a complex interplay between the old pagan fears and the new Christian doctrines. This blending created a rich tapestry of folklore that both preserved and transformed the ancient tales of the Boggart, showing how deeply ingrained these fears were in the cultural consciousness. The Boggart's presence was a constant reminder of the thin line between the sacred and the profane, the holy and the damned. It embodied the fears that lurked just beyond the reach of divine light, and the Church's struggle to combat these fears was as much about asserting control over the unknown as it was about guiding the faithful. Each haunting tale, each exorcism performed, was a testament to the Church's battle against the darkness that threatened to envelop the human spirit. In essence, the Boggart was more than a mere creature of folklore, it was a symbol of the fears that tested the limits of faith. The Church's efforts to confront and control these fears reflected its broader mission to protect and guide its followers through the uncertainties of life. The stories of Boggarts and their interactions with the Church are a poignant reminder of the ways in which human beings have always sought to make sense of the unknown, finding solace in faith while battling the shadows that lurk just out of sight. The roar of machinery and the steam rising from bustling factories marked the dawn of a new era, one that seemed to push the shadows of old legends further into the dark. The Industrial Age, with its relentless march of progress and its promise of a brighter future, began to overshadow the ancient fears that once ruled the hearts of people. Amid the clang of metal and the hiss of engines, the Boggart, those eerie figures of folklore, found itself struggling for relevance. Once upon a time, the Boggart was a fixture in the quiet, rural landscapes of England. It haunted the fields and forests, stirring fear in the night. People whispered about its mischief, their tales colored by the dim light of candlelit cottages. But as the smoke from factory chimneys began to blanket the sky and the countryside gave way to bustling towns and cities, the Boggart's presence seemed to wane. The world was changing, and with it, the place of old fears in the collective imagination. The Industrial Age brought a whirlwind of transformation. Villages that had once been small, tight-knit communities were now swallowed by sprawling cities. The connection between people and the natural world, where Boggarts had once lurked, was replaced by the cold steel of railways and the mechanized hum of industry. The myths that had once explained the unknown and the frightening began to feel out of place in a world dominated by progress and innovation. Yet, even as the Boggart faded from the daily lives of many, it did not disappear entirely. Instead, it morphed, adapting to its new surroundings. The Boggart became a figure of nostalgia, a symbol of a simpler, more mystical past. In the factories and the new urban sprawl, people would tell stories of the Boggart as a way of clinging to a piece of the old world, a reminder of the rural past that was slipping away. The rapid urbanization created new anxieties and challenges, and the Boggart found a new role as a metaphor for the fears of the age. The creature's tricks and pranks began to symbolize the disruptive changes people faced in their daily lives. The industrial noise and the chaos of crowded streets were, in a way, their own kind of haunting. In this sense, the Boggart became a reflection of the anxieties brought on by the transformation of society. Its mischief mirrored the unpredictable and often unsettling changes that came with the Industrial Age. The eerie tales of the Boggart found their way into literature and popular culture, reimagined for a new audience. Writers and storytellers began to use the Boggart to evoke the sense of displacement and fear that came with the era's rapid changes. The Boggart became a creature of the past, its presence a haunting reminder of what had been lost in the rush toward modernity. It became a ghost story for a new age, where the supernatural was less a reality and more a symbol of the dislocation and uncertainty faced by a society in flux. The rise of the Industrial Age also brought with it a shift in how people perceived and dealt with fear. The Boggart, once a tangible and immediate menace, now seemed like a relic of a bygone era. The Industrial Revolution's emphasis on reason and science began to erode the belief in supernatural creatures. Rational explanations replaced old fears, and the Boggart, with its mischievous ways, became a quaint but largely irrelevant piece of folklore. Yet, in the quiet corners of the new urban world, the Boggart still had a place. In the minds of those who longed for the simplicity of the past, it remained a comforting presence. It was a way to remember the connection to nature that the industrial age had begun to sever. Even as the world changed, the Boggart's tales provided a thread to a time when the shadows were more than just shadows, they were a part of the living, breathing world around them. The Boggart's place in society during the industrial age was a complex one. It was a creature caught between worlds, struggling to find a role in an era that was moving swiftly away from the old ways. Its stories became nostalgic echoes, haunting reminders of a time when the fear of the unknown was intertwined with the everyday lives of people. In the hustle and bustle of industrial progress, the Boggart stood as a symbol of the mysteries and fears that had once been very real but were now fading into the background of a rapidly changing world. On a misty, moonlit night, a traveler trudges through the desolate countryside, the darkness pressing close around him. Each step is a challenge, his path illuminated only by the flickering light of a lantern. The wind howls mournfully through the trees, and every shadow seems to whisper secrets of the unknown. As the traveler makes his way across England's lonely roads, the tales of the Boggart, creatures born from fear and superstition, become chillingly real. The Boggart was never just a tale told around the hearth. For some, it was a very real terror faced in the dead of night. Travelers, journeying from one town to another, found themselves frequently crossing paths with these malevolent spirits. One particularly haunting story tells of a weary traveler who, desperate to find shelter, stumbled upon a small, abandoned cottage. Exhausted, he entered, hoping to find rest. But as he settled into the silence of the empty room, he heard the faintest sound of scratching coming from the walls. The scratching grew louder, turning into a relentless scraping that seemed to follow him wherever he moved. The traveler's heart raced. He tried to ignore it, to convince himself it was just the wind or perhaps a rat. But the scratching persisted, and soon, he could see the shadows on the wall shift unnaturally, as if something was trying to break through. Fear gripped him as he realized that the tales of Boggarts were more than just stories, they were warnings. In another eerie tale, a merchant on his way to sell his goods encountered a Boggart in a dense forest. The path was narrow, and the merchant, alone with his thoughts, heard a rustling that didn't match the rhythm of the wind. His eyes darted around, but he saw nothing, only the oppressive darkness of the forest. The rustling grew closer, and the merchant's unease turned to terror as he felt an icy chill brush against his neck. As he quickened his pace, the rustling followed, echoing louder and louder until it seemed to come from all directions. In the heart of the forest, surrounded by shadows, he glimpsed a fleeting figure, a dark shape that seemed to be darting between the trees. The merchant, desperate and trembling, fled the forest as fast as he could. The experience left him with a haunting reminder of the Boggart's power and the chilling reality of its presence. Travelers often spoke of encountering Boggarts in the most unexpected places, on lonely moors, along desolate roads, and near abandoned buildings. These encounters were not merely unsettling but left a lasting impact on their souls. In one tale, a group of travelers camping in an old, overgrown graveyard found their nightmarish experience recorded in every tremor of fear. As they sat around the campfire, the ground began to shift beneath them. The travelers tried to convince themselves it was an animal or an odd shift in the earth, but the sensation grew more pronounced. Shadows danced unnaturally around them, and the temperature dropped sharply. The air was thick with an oppressive sense of dread. As the shadows seemed to close in, the travelers huddled together, clutching each other for comfort. They were haunted not by a visible Boggart, but by the overwhelming sense of being watched and pursued by something malevolent that seemed to thrive in the darkness. Each tale of travelers encountering Boggarts echoes with a similar sense of fear and helplessness. The Boggart, with its ability to blend into the night, turn shadows into its allies, and exploit the traveler's deepest fears, became a symbol of the unknown and the uncontrollable. For those who crossed paths with these creatures, the experience was more than a story, it was a deeply personal brush with something profoundly unsettling and terrifying. As the sun rises and the traveler escapes the Boggart's grasp, the memory of the encounter lingers like a ghostly shadow. The fear of the Boggart and its tricks remains a powerful force, transforming ordinary journeys into encounters with the supernatural. These tales serve as stark reminders of the dark corners that lie hidden within even the most familiar landscapes and the creatures that dwell within them. In recounting these chilling experiences, the stories of Boggarts faced by travelers serve as a testament to the enduring power of folklore to evoke fear and wonder. The Boggart, though it may have faded from daily life, continues to haunt the edges of our imaginations, whispering of the unseen and the unknown as travelers across England find themselves walking in the footsteps of those who came before them, forever touched by the spectral hand of the Boggart. In the dim glow of city lights, where the urban hustle meets the shadowed corners of forgotten alleyways, the old fears of the countryside have found a new voice. The Boggart, once a rural terror of dark forests and isolated farms, has slipped into the bustling life of modern cities, becoming a part of urban legends that chill the bones of those who hear them. In the heart of the city, stories of the Boggart take on a new guise, shifting from ancient folklore to urban myths that haunt the streets and the minds of city dwellers. These tales are no longer just whispers in the wind, but vivid stories that thread through the everyday lives of people, turning familiar places into settings of dread. One such tale tells of a dilapidated apartment building on the edge of the city, where residents have reported strange occurrences for years. Lights flicker without reason, doors slam shut on their own, and the air grows icy without warning. The latest tenant, a young woman new to the city, is warned by her neighbors about the building's dark past. They speak of a Boggart, a spirit that preys on those who live in its domain. Late at night, the woman hears footsteps in the empty hallways, sees shadows darting past her window, and feels an oppressive presence pressing down on her as she tries to sleep. The sense of being watched is almost unbearable, a constant reminder that the Boggart, or something like it, is lurking just beyond the edge of her perception. The building's eerie reputation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, turning the woman's ordinary life into a nightly battle against an unseen force. In another urban legend, a group of teenagers decides to explore an abandoned subway station, a place rumored to be haunted. As they venture deeper into the dark tunnels, their laughter and bravado fade into silence. The station, once a bustling part of the city's transport system, now holds only the whispers of the past and the unsettling feeling of being watched. The group encounters strange noises and fleeting shadows, feeling an icy chill that doesn't match the temperature of the underground. One of them swears they see a dark figure moving in the corner of their vision, a creature that resembles the Boggart of old tales. As they scramble to leave, the sense of being followed becomes palpable, heightening their fear with every echoing footstep and distant clatter. The station's dark history and the legends surrounding it have come alive, blending with the Boggart's reputation to create an experience that is both thrilling and terrifying. These urban legends weave the Boggart into the fabric of modern fears, adapting ancient stories to fit the landscape of contemporary anxieties. In a crowded city, where the isolation of the countryside has been replaced by the claustrophobic buzz of human activity, the Boggart's presence is felt in a more intimate way. The Boggart is no longer just a creature of folklore, but a part of the city's hidden history, a shadow that lingers just out of sight. The transition from rural tales to urban legends reflects a deep-seated need to find meaning in the unknown, to explain the inexplicable with stories that resonate on a personal level. The Boggart, in its new urban form, serves as a reminder of the fears that dwell just beneath the surface of daily life, the fears that follow us even into the safety of our homes and the busy streets of the city. In these modern tales, the Boggart becomes a symbol of the fears that urban life can't always dispel. It represents the darkness that lurks in the corners of our lives, the anxieties that accompany us through the hustle and bustle of modern existence. The stories of the Boggart, now a part of urban legends, remind us that no matter how much we try to rationalize or dismiss our fears, they are always there, waiting to emerge from the shadows. In the quiet moments of family gatherings, when the crackling fire casts dancing shadows on the walls, old stories come alive, whispered from one generation to the next. Among these tales, the Boggart, an unsettling spirit from ancient folklore, finds a unique place, shaping family life in ways that both chill and bond. One such story comes from a small village where a family lived in a centuries-old cottage. This home, with its creaky floors and drafty corners, was said to be haunted by a Boggart. For years, the family passed down the tale of how this mischievous spirit would hide objects, make strange noises, and occasionally cause eerie cold spots that seemed to move through the house on their own. The Boggart's presence became a part of family lore, a story told to children with a mix of fear and fascination. Every creak of the house or misplaced object was attributed to the Boggart's antics, making it a household name. During stormy nights, when the wind howled and the house seemed to groan, the children would huddle together, their parents' voices soothing yet tinged with the mystery of the unseen. One memorable tale recounts a night when the eldest daughter lost a cherished locket. She searched high and low, her frustration mounting as each minute ticked by. Finally, in desperation, she appealed to the Boggart, pleading for the return of her precious item. The next morning, the locket was found in a place she had searched countless times, a hidden corner of the attic. The family interpreted this as a sign that the Boggart, despite its mischief, was not entirely malevolent. This story became a treasured part of their family history, a testament to how the Boggart was woven into the fabric of their lives. In another family, the Boggart's role was used as a cautionary tale for children, particularly during the dark, winter months. Parents told their children about the Boggart's trickery to encourage them to behave well. The Boggart was said to roam the dark, looking for misbehaving children, ready to play pranks or even carry them off to its mysterious lair if they were too unruly. These stories, while frightening, were also meant to instill discipline and a sense of respect for the unknown. One story tells of a young boy who, despite his parents' warnings, would wander too far from home at dusk. His parents warned him that the Boggart might snatch him away if he didn't heed their advice. One evening, as he was caught in a fierce storm and struggled to find his way back, he was found by his worried parents. They told him that the Boggart had been watching over him, its dark presence lurking in the storm. From then on, the boy never strayed far from home, and the story of that night became a family legend, a tale of both fear and protection. As generations passed, the Boggart stories were told around family tables, during holiday gatherings, and on quiet evenings by the fire. These tales, with their blend of fear and fascination, became a way for families to connect with their past and with each other. The Boggart, though an unsettling presence, was a shared experience, a part of their collective history that bound them together through its unsettling tales. Each retelling of the Boggart story served to remind the family of their shared heritage, their bond through the trials and tribulations that came with living alongside an invisible, mischievous spirit. The Boggart was not just a story of fear, but also of family resilience and unity, a creature that, despite its frightful nature, played a role in shaping their lives and traditions. These stories, passed down through the years, hold a special place in the family's collective memory. They are a testament to how folklore can shape and be shaped by the lives of those who believe in it, turning a creature of ancient fears into a cherished part of family history. Through the Boggart, families have found a way to connect with their past, to teach lessons, and to keep their traditions alive, one eerie tale at a time. In the dimly lit corners of old paintings and ancient illustrations, Boggarts emerge as eerie, haunting figures, casting a long shadow over the history of art and symbolism. Their presence in artwork reflects the deep-seated fears and superstitions that have been passed down through generations, capturing the essence of their role in folklore. One striking depiction is found in medieval manuscripts where Boggarts are often shown as small, twisted creatures with gnarled features. These images are not just about physical appearance, but also about embodying the essence of fear. The Boggart's eyes are sometimes depicted as glowing with malevolent intent, emphasizing its role as a source of terror and mischief. The art of this period often uses dark, shadowy tones and grotesque forms to represent these beings, making them seem almost alive, creeping out from the edges of the page. In these artworks, the Boggart symbolizes the unknown and the uncontrollable aspects of human life. It is a manifestation of the fears that lurk in the dark, the anxieties that creep into the corners of the mind. The grotesque features and eerie expressions are a visual representation of how people have historically feared and tried to understand the inexplicable. This symbolism is particularly evident in pieces where Boggarts are shown in their role as tricksters, causing chaos and confusion among humans. In later art, as society moved into the Renaissance and beyond, the depiction of Boggarts evolved. Artists began to infuse these figures with a sense of dark humor or irony. They were often depicted in scenes where they interacted with human figures, causing trouble in domestic settings or in the wild. These artworks portray Boggarts as more mischievous than malevolent, reflecting a shift in how people perceived these creatures. The Boggart in art became a symbol of life's little inconveniences, the minor annoyances that people face in their everyday lives. One vivid example from the Victorian era shows Boggarts in elaborate scenes filled with symbolic meaning. In these illustrations, Boggarts are often portrayed as small, almost comical figures that disrupt otherwise orderly scenes. This shift in depiction signifies how the fear associated with Boggarts had transformed into something more manageable and less terrifying. The symbolism here speaks to the way that fears, once overwhelming, can become less daunting when faced with a sense of humor or perspective. The Boggarts' place in modern art also reflects a changing perception of these mythical beings. Contemporary artists use Boggarts as symbols of inner turmoil or personal struggle. Their portrayal in modern art often combines elements of traditional folklore with modern anxieties. The Boggart might appear in abstract forms, representing the intangible fears and stresses of contemporary life. In these artworks, the Boggart is a metaphor for the challenges people face, a symbol of the dark thoughts and feelings that everyone grapples with. Throughout art history, the Boggart has been more than just a figure of folklore, it has become a powerful symbol of human emotion and experience. From the early, fearsome depictions to the more nuanced portrayals in modern art, the Boggart captures the essence of human struggle with the unknown. Each depiction is a reflection of how society has understood and faced its fears, turning a creature of ancient tales into a timeless symbol of the human condition. In the shadows of English folklore, the Boggart stands as more than just a creature of fright. It emerges as a central figure in cautionary tales designed to impart vital lessons and moral teachings. The stories surrounding Boggarts are filled with fear and intrigue, but beneath their spooky surface lies a deeper message meant to guide and instruct. One tale speaks of a Boggart that haunts a village, creating havoc and spreading fear. The villagers, desperate to stop the mischief, seek out a wise old woman who tells them that the Boggart can only be driven away by a person who is truly brave and selfless. As the villagers face their fears and work together, they discover that the true power to banish the Boggart lies not in magic or force, but in their own courage and unity. This story is more than a ghost story, it's a powerful reminder of the strength found in community and the importance of overcoming personal fears. In another tale, a Boggart terrorizes a household, disrupting daily life and spreading chaos. The family, unable to find peace, decides to change their ways. They begin to live with greater respect for one another, treating each other with kindness and patience. Gradually, the Boggart's disturbances lessen, and the family's harmony returns. The tale underscores a vital lesson: personal behavior and attitudes shape our experiences. It teaches that by changing how we interact with others, we can transform even the most troubling situations. A particularly moving story involves a Boggart that appears only at night, frightening a young child who can't sleep. The child, initially terrified, learns to confront the Boggart with bravery. Over time, the Boggart's fearsome image fades, revealing a harmless creature. This story imparts a crucial lesson about facing one's fears directly and understanding that often, what we fear is less frightening once we confront it. The transformation of the Boggart from a terror to a harmless entity symbolizes how our anxieties can diminish when we face them head-on. In many of these tales, the Boggart serves as a metaphor for the challenges and moral dilemmas people face. It embodies the fears and obstacles that, when approached with wisdom and courage, can lead to personal growth and understanding. The stories teach that the real power to change our lives lies within us, not in the supernatural creatures that might frighten us. The Boggart's role in cautionary tales is deeply intertwined with the human experience. Each story offers a window into how people have historically dealt with fear, adversity, and moral lessons. Through these tales, the Boggart becomes a tool for teaching resilience, bravery, and the importance of personal integrity. By facing the Boggart, characters in these stories confront their own weaknesses and emerge stronger, embodying the timeless lessons of folklore. The night air is thick with the scent of old books and the whispers of the past. The flickering candlelight reveals the silhouette of an old folklore collector, hunched over a desk, furiously scribbling notes. The world of Boggarts, those eerie, mischief-making spirits, has been preserved and passed down through these dedicated collectors, who have become the custodians of stories that might otherwise have vanished into obscurity. Their work is not just about recording tales, but about capturing the very essence of fear and wonder that these stories evoke. These collectors venture into remote villages and ancient towns, seeking out the elders and storytellers who hold the last fragments of Boggart lore. They listen intently as tales of Boggarts are told, stories of spectral beings causing mayhem in quiet homes or lurking in the shadows of darkened forests. One collector, armed with nothing but a notebook and a heart full of curiosity, ventures to a tiny, forgotten village where the air is heavy with superstition. Here, the Boggart is more than a story, it's a living, breathing entity that shapes the lives of the villagers. The collector sits by the fireside with an elderly woman who, with trembling hands, recounts a chilling encounter with a Boggart that haunted her childhood. Her voice quivers as she describes how the Boggart would steal food and make eerie sounds at night. Through her eyes, the collector sees not just a tale of terror, but a glimpse into a world where the supernatural and the everyday intertwine. As the collector records these stories, they become more than mere words on paper. They capture the emotion and fear that define the Boggart lore. The collector's notes are filled with descriptions of frightened faces, whispered warnings, and the sense of dread that the Boggart instills in those who believe in it. Each story adds a layer to the complex tapestry of Boggart mythology, enriching our understanding of these enigmatic creatures. Another collector journeys into the heart of Old England, where the Boggart has a deep-rooted presence. Here, the collector meets with local historians and folklore enthusiasts who have preserved ancient manuscripts and oral traditions. These manuscripts tell of Boggarts that haunt ancient ruins and curse those who dare to disturb their resting places. The collector is captivated by the rich, textured accounts of how these spirits were believed to bring bad luck or misfortune to those who crossed their path. The work of these folklore collectors is also a labor of love. They face skepticism and occasional hostility from those who view their pursuits as antiquated or irrelevant. Yet, their passion for preserving the stories is unwavering. They understand that these tales are not just relics of the past, but vital pieces of cultural heritage that offer insights into human fears and beliefs. By documenting the Boggart lore, they ensure that the stories remain alive, even as the world around them changes. Through their meticulous work, folklore collectors breathe new life into the Boggart legends. They gather fragments of fear and wonder and weave them into a narrative that connects past and present. Each story they document becomes a part of the collective memory, preserving the essence of the Boggart as it was imagined by those who lived in its shadow. As the collector finishes their latest entry, the night grows quiet. The candle flickers and the pages of the notebook rest heavily with the weight of ancient tales. These stories of Boggarts, of mischief, fear, and folklore, are not merely preserved, they are given a voice and a place in the world. The work of these collectors ensures that the haunting tales of Boggarts will continue to be told, keeping the spirit of these eerie creatures alive for generations to come. In the dim glow of a movie theater or the pages of a best-selling novel, the Boggart has found a surprising resurgence. The creature, once a whisper in old tales and a shadow in the folklore of England, now walks boldly into the limelight of modern storytelling. The Boggart's haunting charm and eerie presence have captivated a new generation, offering chills and thrills that reach across centuries. In film and television, the Boggart has shed its ancient, dusty image to become a vivid and compelling character. One of the most iconic appearances is in the Harry Potter series, where the Boggart is brought to life as a shape-shifting terror. Here, it's not just a figure of folklore, but a creature with the ability to transform into the deepest fears of anyone who encounters it. The depiction of the Boggart in the films is both unsettling and fascinating. Its transformation from an ordinary object into something terrifying taps into the primal fears of the human psyche. This portrayal has introduced the Boggart to millions of viewers, blending it seamlessly into the magical world of Hogwarts. Beyond the wizarding world, the Boggart's influence extends into other realms of popular culture. In television series, the Boggart has become a symbol of anxiety and the unknown. It appears as a shadowy figure in episodes that delve into the supernatural, its form ever-shifting and its presence menacing. The Boggart in these shows is not merely a monster, it's a reflection of inner fears, a manifestation of the character's struggles and insecurities. Each encounter with the Boggart is a psychological dance, a confrontation with what lies hidden in the corners of our minds. In literature, the Boggart has re-emerged in a new light. Modern authors have woven the creature into contemporary settings, blending the old with the new. These stories often portray the Boggart as a metaphor for personal challenges and societal fears. In one popular novel, the Boggart takes the form of a seemingly benign object that gradually reveals its sinister nature, symbolizing how even the most ordinary things can harbor dark secrets. This modern twist on the Boggart keeps the essence of its folklore origins while making it relevant to today's readers. The resurgence of the Boggart in popular culture is not just about adding a chilling element to stories, it's about exploring the human condition. By reimagining the Boggart for modern audiences, creators tap into a rich vein of emotion and fear that resonates with contemporary issues. The Boggart's ability to shapeshift and embody fear mirrors our own struggles with anxiety and uncertainty. Its presence in popular culture serves as a reminder that the shadows of our past are never too far behind, and that confronting our fears can be both a harrowing and enlightening experience. In this new age of storytelling, the Boggart stands as a testament to the enduring power of folklore. It bridges the gap between ancient myths and modern anxieties, offering a glimpse into how timeless fears continue to shape and influence our world. Each appearance of the Boggart in popular culture is a reminder of its origins, a nod to the legends that have haunted and fascinated generations. As the Boggart reclaims its place in the spotlight, it carries with it the weight of history and the promise of new stories yet to be told. In the shadowy corners of our world, where the line between the known and the unknown blurs, the Boggart makes a chilling reappearance. Modern paranormal phenomena often evoke images of ghosts and spectral apparitions, but there's a darker, more unsettling presence that has slipped into these narratives, the Boggart. This ancient creature, once a mere whisper in folklore, now intertwines with contemporary reports of the supernatural, adding an eerie depth to the mystery. The Boggart's connection to the paranormal is both fascinating and unnerving. Stories of encounters with Boggarts are increasingly being reported alongside tales of ghosts and hauntings. People claim to experience these creatures not just as apparitions, but as entities that cause inexplicable disturbances. These disturbances range from small, unsettling incidents, objects moving on their own, shadows darting out of sight, to more intense experiences that leave lasting marks on the psyche. In one gripping account, a family in rural England reported a series of disturbing events that left them on edge. They spoke of hearing footsteps in the middle of the night, feeling cold spots, and seeing objects disappear and reappear in odd places. The climax of their terror was the sighting of a shadowy figure that seemed to flicker and change shape. Their description of this entity echoed the old tales of Boggarts, shape-shifting, menacing, and deeply unsettling. Similarly, paranormal investigators have encountered what they believe to be Boggarts during their explorations. In abandoned houses and forgotten places, they've documented phenomena that defy simple explanations. Electronic voice phenomena, strange electromagnetic readings, and even physical disturbances have been linked to encounters with entities that resemble traditional descriptions of Boggarts. The investigators' accounts paint a picture of creatures that feed off fear and confusion, much like their ancient counterparts. The Boggart's role in these modern stories reflects a deeper fear, a fear of the unknown that transcends time. It's not merely about the supernatural, but about our own vulnerabilities. The Boggart, with its ability to morph into whatever terrifies us most, embodies our innermost fears. It takes the form of our anxieties and turns them into tangible threats. In the dark, when the line between reality and imagination blurs, the Boggart becomes a living nightmare, a manifestation of our deepest insecurities. The connection between Boggarts and modern paranormal phenomena highlights how ancient fears continue to haunt us. The creature's shift from folklore to paranormal accounts underscores a timeless anxiety that refuses to fade. As our understanding of the supernatural evolves, the Boggart remains a chilling reminder of the fears that lie just beyond our comprehension. Its presence in today's paranormal stories adds a layer of historical depth to our encounters with the unknown, linking the past with the present in a tapestry of terror. In these tales, the Boggart stands as a bridge between ancient myth and modern mystery. It reflects our enduring struggle with the unknown and our need to confront the shadows that lurk in the darkness. Each encounter with a Boggart, whether in a dusty corner of an old house or in the pages of a paranormal report, is a reminder that the fears of yesterday are still very much alive today. Picture waking up with a jolt, heart racing, after a dream so vivid that the line between reality and the dream world seems to blur. In this unsettling dream, you encounter a Boggart, its form shifting, always just out of reach, embodying your deepest fears. Such dreams are not mere fantasy. They hold a mirror up to our souls, revealing the hidden fears and anxieties that shape our lives. Boggarts in dreams often appear as elusive, shape-shifting entities, changing form to reflect our most profound anxieties. Unlike other dreams where the surreal can be easily dismissed, Boggarts in dreams have a way of sticking with you, casting a lingering shadow over your waking hours. These dreams are haunting, not just because of their content, but because they seem to tap into something fundamental within us, a primal fear of the unknown. When a Boggart appears in dreams, it often does so in ways that evoke a deep, instinctive terror. These dreams might involve dark, twisting hallways where the Boggart hides just out of sight, or sudden, inexplicable noises that seem to come from nowhere. The Boggart's shifting appearance in dreams may mirror personal insecurities, turning them into tangible threats. For example, if someone dreams of a Boggart taking the form of a menacing figure from their past, it could be an expression of unresolved fears or traumas. Psychologically, these dreams are a way for our minds to process and confront fears that we might not fully acknowledge in our waking life. The Boggart's ability to morph and change is symbolic of how our anxieties can shift and adapt, often in ways that make them harder to face. This shifting nature can represent the ways in which our fears are not fixed but can change form depending on our circumstances and state of mind. Dreams featuring Boggarts also tap into the universal theme of confronting the unknown. They often occur during times of stress or uncertainty, reflecting our struggles with things beyond our control. The unsettling nature of these dreams can lead to a heightened sense of vulnerability, revealing how we cope with fears that are both internal and external. In this way, the Boggart becomes a symbol of the fears that lurk just out of sight, influencing our feelings and actions even when we are not consciously aware of them. The psychological significance of Boggarts in dreams extends to how they represent the fear of change and the unknown. Just as the Boggart morphs and shifts in dreams, so too do our anxieties evolve and transform. This can be a way for the subconscious to explore and process these changes, helping us to come to terms with them in our waking life. By facing the Boggart in dreams, we are, in a sense, grappling with our own inner demons, working through the fear and uncertainty that they bring. The impact of these dreams can be profound. They may leave a lasting impression, affecting mood and behavior long after waking. People often find themselves haunted by these dreams, as if the Boggart has followed them into their daily life, influencing their thoughts and emotions. This lingering effect is a testament to how deeply these dreams resonate, revealing how our subconscious mind processes and deals with our fears. In essence, Boggarts in dreams are more than just frightening figures, they are reflections of our deepest anxieties and insecurities. They challenge us to confront the fears that we might otherwise try to ignore, bringing them into the open where we can examine and understand them. The eerie presence of the Boggart in dreams serves as a powerful reminder of the struggles that lie beneath the surface of our everyday lives, urging us to face and make peace with the fears that shape our existence. In a world driven by technology and constant change, the eerie charm of Boggart stories has found a surprising place in modern culture. Once merely whispers in the dark corners of English folklore, these creatures have transformed into powerful symbols in today's media, resonating with the fears and uncertainties of a new generation. The modern retelling of Boggart stories often strips them of their ancient context, yet retains their core essence, a manifestation of our deepest fears. Today's Boggarts are no longer confined to the moors and villages of old. Instead, they lurk in the shadows of our urban landscapes and digital worlds, adapting to the anxieties of contemporary life. They may not always take the shape of a traditional goblin or spirit, but often emerge as metaphorical representations of stress, insecurity, and the unknown challenges of modern existence. In film and television, Boggarts have morphed into complex characters that blend seamlessly into our world. They appear as dark, unsettling forces in horror movies or as whimsical yet sinister entities in children's media. This adaptation allows them to tap into the universal human experience of confronting the inexplicable. Modern audiences see Boggarts as both tangible threats and symbolic representations of their inner fears, mirroring how the ancient tales addressed the anxieties of their time. Books and literature also reflect this evolution. Contemporary authors weave Boggarts into their narratives, using them to explore themes of fear, identity, and personal struggle. In these stories, Boggarts often symbolize the characters' inner turmoil, giving shape to their hidden insecurities and emotional battles. By integrating these creatures into modern plots, writers create a bridge between the folklore of the past and the psychological complexities of the present. This adaptation helps readers relate to ancient myths in a new light, showing that the fears and challenges of humanity remain timeless. The resurgence of Boggart stories in modern media is also a testament to their enduring relevance. These tales resonate with people today because they address fundamental human fears that persist across generations. Whether it's the fear of the unknown, the anxiety of change, or the struggle with internal demons, Boggarts represent a way to confront these issues in a manner that is both engaging and meaningful. Their transformation from folklore to modern symbolism highlights how ancient stories can evolve while still addressing the core fears that unite us. Furthermore, Boggarts in modern media often appear in settings that reflect contemporary anxieties. In urban legends, they might haunt high-tech cities or digital spaces, mirroring the concerns of a technologically driven world. Their presence in these settings underscores how old fears adapt to new environments, illustrating the timeless nature of the human condition. By appearing in these contexts, Boggarts become more relatable, showing that the fears of the past are still very much alive today. Social media and online communities have also played a role in the adaptation of Boggart stories. In digital forums and viral content, Boggarts are often reimagined as figures that embody the fears and uncertainties of online life. Whether it's the dread of being watched or the fear of anonymity, these modern Boggarts reflect the anxieties of a digital age. This adaptation allows for a shared understanding of fears that span across cultures and technologies, making the ancient tales relevant in a rapidly changing world. The evolution of Boggart stories into the modern age demonstrates their flexibility and enduring power. These tales, once confined to the oral traditions of bygone eras, now find new expressions in our contemporary lives. They adapt to our fears, reflecting the ways in which our anxieties evolve but remain fundamentally the same. By confronting these modern Boggarts, we engage with our deepest fears in ways that are both new and familiar, proving that the essence of these ancient stories continues to speak to us in powerful and poignant ways. In the quiet corners of England's countryside, Boggarts have played a subtle yet profound role in shaping regional and national identities. These mysterious beings, rooted deeply in local folklore, serve as more than just eerie tales. They are threads woven into the fabric of English culture, binding communities together and defining their unique character. Picture a small village in northern England, where fog rolls over the moors and old stone houses seem to whisper secrets. Here, Boggarts are not mere figments of imagination but real entities with the power to influence daily life. For generations, stories of these creatures have been passed down, creating a shared history that binds the community. Each story, each haunting, becomes a part of the village's collective memory, enriching their sense of identity. The fear of a boggart lurking in the shadows becomes a rite of passage, a way for the village to connect with its past and preserve its unique character. These tales contribute to a broader sense of regional identity, differentiating one part of England from another. In the rolling hills of Yorkshire, boggarts are often depicted as mischievous spirits causing minor annoyances. They represent the rugged, resilient nature of the people who live there. In contrast, in the more mystical landscapes of Cornwall, boggarts might take on a more sinister tone, reflecting the region's rich tapestry of Celtic myths and deep-rooted traditions. Each region's version of the boggart tells a different story, yet all contribute to the collective identity of their communities, reinforcing a sense of belonging and shared heritage. The impact of boggart myths extends beyond local communities to the national stage. As English folklore has been documented and celebrated in literature and media, boggarts have become symbols of the nation's cultural richness. They embody the essence of traditional English folklore, providing a link between the past and present. In national stories and celebrations, boggarts are often referenced as emblematic of England's unique charm and historical depth. They offer a way for the nation to connect with its roots and celebrate its distinctiveness amidst the ever-changing landscape of modern life. These mythical beings also serve as a reflection of the national psyche, symbolizing both the fears and resilience of the English people. The stories of boggarts, with their eerie presence and unsettling influence, mirror the anxieties and challenges faced by individuals and communities. In a sense, boggarts become a metaphor for the struggles and triumphs of the English people, highlighting their ability to confront and overcome adversity. This connection between folklore and identity helps to solidify a sense of pride and continuity, reinforcing the idea that despite the passage of time, the essence of England remains constant. In popular culture, boggarts are often used to evoke a sense of nostalgia and connection to English heritage. They appear in literature, films, and folklore studies as symbols of traditional English culture. By integrating boggarts into modern storytelling, creators tap into a deep well of cultural identity, bringing these ancient myths into contemporary consciousness. This not only preserves the tales, but also strengthens their role in defining what it means to be part of England's rich cultural landscape. As England continues to evolve, the role of boggarts in shaping regional and national identity remains as relevant as ever. They serve as a reminder of the power of folklore to influence and define cultural heritage. Through their stories, boggarts connect individuals and communities to a shared past, reinforcing a sense of identity that is both enduring and deeply personal. Whether in the quiet village or on the national stage, these mythical creatures continue to play a vital role in the tapestry of English culture, binding together the old and the new, the seen and the unseen, in a unique and poignant way. In the dim glow of twilight, when the world seems to hold its breath, the presence of boggarts becomes a chilling whisper in the night. These beings, shrouded in mystery and fear, are believed to inhabit an unseen world that coexists with our own. Their stories, etched in shadows and half-remembered dreams, paint a picture of a hidden realm just beyond the veil of everyday life. Imagine walking through an ancient forest where the trees seem to lean in, the gnarled branches whispering secrets of the unseen. Here, it's easy to believe that something otherworldly might be lurking just beyond the reach of the lantern's light. Boggarts are said to dwell in such places, invisible yet palpable, their presence felt in the rustle of leaves and the sudden chill in the air. These creatures are believed to inhabit a parallel world, one that mirrors our own but remains hidden from ordinary view. Their existence is a reminder of the mysteries that lie beyond the everyday, hinting at a reality that we can sense but not fully see. In many tales, boggarts are described as beings that slip in and out of our world, their actions a blend of mischief and menace. They are said to haunt abandoned houses, ancient woods, and forgotten corners, places where the boundary between the known and the unknown seems thin. These stories evoke a sense of eerie familiarity, as if the unseen world is not so far away after all. The boggart's presence in these places adds a layer of tension and suspense, making us question what lies just beyond our perception. The notion of boggarts as part of an unseen world reflects a deep-seated human fear of the unknown. It speaks to our collective anxiety about what might be lurking just out of sight, waiting to intrude on our safe and orderly lives. The fear of Boggarts taps into our primal instincts, reminding us that there are forces beyond our control, lurking in the shadows. This fear is both unsettling and thrilling, drawing us into a world where the rules are different, and the ordinary becomes extraordinary. In folklore, Boggarts are often associated with supernatural phenomena that disrupt the mundane. They are said to cause unexplained noises, misplace objects, and create an atmosphere of unease. These disruptions serve as a reminder of the presence of the unseen world, a world that is always there, just beyond the reach of our understanding. The Boggarts' role in these stories is to challenge the boundaries of what is known and what is hidden, making us confront the possibility that there is more to reality than meets the eye. The idea of an unseen world also reflects our fascination with the mysteries of existence. Boggarts, with their ability to traverse between worlds, symbolize the human desire to explore the unknown. They embody the tension between the visible and the invisible, the tangible and the intangible. This duality captivates our imagination, drawing us into a world where the familiar becomes strange and the boundaries of reality are blurred. As we tell stories about Boggarts and their unseen world, we engage in a form of exploration that transcends the physical. We venture into a realm of possibility, where the lines between reality and imagination become fluid. These stories offer a way to grapple with our fears and curiosities, allowing us to explore the unseen world in a safe and controlled manner. The Boggarts' presence in these tales serves as a bridge between our world and the unknown, making us aware of the mysteries that lie just beyond our perception. In the end, the idea of Boggarts as part of an unseen world is a powerful reminder of the limits of our understanding. It invites us to consider that there may be more to existence than what we can see and touch. The stories of Boggarts evoke a sense of wonder and apprehension, challenging us to confront the mysteries of the unseen world. They remind us that even in our modern, rational lives, there is a place for the unknown and the mysterious, a place where the boundaries of reality are forever shifting and elusive. In the stillness of the evening, as the twilight fades and shadows stretch across the land, the haunting melodies of English folk music begin to stir. These songs, passed down through generations, often whisper of creatures that exist on the edge of the known world. Among them, Boggarts have found their place, their eerie presence weaving through the verses like a chilling breeze. Folk songs that feature Boggarts are not merely tales of fright, but echoes of an older world, where the line between reality and the supernatural was as thin as a spider's thread. These songs capture the essence of Boggarts, mischievous, sometimes malevolent, always mysterious. Through the music, the Boggart spectral dance becomes a living part of the community's collective memory, blending fear with fascination in a way that only music can. One common theme in these songs is the Boggart's role as a trickster. The lyrics often describe how Boggarts play pranks on unsuspecting villagers, stealing shoes, hiding tools, or causing inexplicable noises in the dead of night. These tales are more than mere stories, they reflect the deep-seated belief in the supernatural that once colored everyday life. The songs make the Boggart's presence tangible, turning abstract fear into something visceral and relatable. The melodies associated with Boggart songs are often haunting and plaintive, capturing the eerie mood that surrounds these creatures. A typical Boggart ballad might start with a gentle, almost comforting tune, drawing listeners in with its familiar rhythm. But as the story unfolds, the music shifts, becoming dissonant and unsettling, mirroring the unsettling nature of the Boggart itself. The contrast between the soothing melody and the chilling lyrics heightens the sense of dread, leaving listeners with a lingering sense of unease. The use of folk music to represent Boggarts also serves as a way to convey cultural values and warnings. In some songs, the Boggart's mischief is a metaphor for the consequences of human folly or negligence. The music often carries a moral lesson, subtly warning against greed, arrogance, or disrespect for the natural world. The Boggart's actions, though framed in a supernatural context, reflect real fears and societal concerns, making the music both entertaining and instructional. One poignant example is a song about a Boggart that haunts a family's home, causing trouble and fear until the family learns to live in harmony with the unseen presence. The lyrics often describe the Boggart's antics with a mix of humor and fear, showing how the creature's actions reflect deeper truths about human nature. The tune, while haunting, carries an undertone of hope and resilience, suggesting that even in the face of the unknown, there is a way to find peace. These folk songs have a unique power. They preserve the essence of the Boggart myth, turning it into a living tradition that resonates across time. The music captures the emotional core of the Boggart tales, allowing listeners to feel the same shivers and thrills that people might have felt centuries ago. Through the songs, the Boggart spirit continues to haunt and fascinate, bridging the gap between the past and the present. As these songs are performed and passed down, they keep the legend of the Boggart alive. Each generation adds its own layer to the story, ensuring that the Boggart remains a vibrant and relevant part of the cultural landscape. The songs evolve, adapting to new contexts and audiences, but they always retain the core elements that make the Boggart such a compelling figure. In the end, the representation of Boggarts in English folk music is more than just a reflection of a myth. It is a testament to the enduring power of storytelling through song. The music captures the essence of the Boggart's eerie presence, blending fear, fascination, and folklore into a timeless tradition that continues to resonate with audiences. Through the haunting melodies and evocative lyrics, the Boggart remains a spectral presence in the world of folk music, a reminder of the mysterious and the magical that lies just beyond the surface of our everyday lives. In the quiet corners of English folklore, where the whisper of ancient trees and the murmur of unseen streams blend into the fabric of the land, the Boggart lurks as a shadowy figure tied deeply to nature. These myths are not merely tales of mischief, but also resonate with a deeper message about the environment and our place within it. Picture a small, rural village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. The Boggarts, those elusive and often troublesome spirits, are believed to be protectors of these natural spaces. According to the legends, these creatures were not just spirits of the dark but guardians of the land, keepers of the balance between human activity and nature's well-being. Their antics, from hiding tools to causing strange noises, were reminders to respect and tread lightly on the environment. In old stories, if someone mistreated the land, overharvesting crops or damaging the woods, a Boggart's mischief would soon follow. Farmers who neglected their fields or cut down trees recklessly would find their tools gone, their crops failing, or their homes plagued by eerie disturbances. These tales served as powerful symbols of nature's displeasure and the consequences of disrupting the delicate balance of the environment. The Boggart's role was to ensure that people remained connected to the land, reminding them of their responsibilities. The belief in these creatures was a form of environmental stewardship wrapped in the guise of folklore. The Boggart's presence was a living testament to the idea that the natural world has a spirit of its own, one that reacts to the care or harm we inflict upon it. Consider a story from a small village in Yorkshire, where the Boggart was said to inhabit a nearby forest. The villagers, aware of the Boggart's reputation, would always make sure to leave offerings of food and small tokens at the forest's edge. This ritual was not merely for superstition but a way of showing respect and gratitude for the land that sustained them. The Boggart, in return, was believed to keep the forest healthy and the land fertile. The environment played a central role in these stories. The Boggart's behavior was often linked directly to the state of the natural surroundings. When the land was healthy and well cared for, the Boggart's antics were mild and relatively harmless. However, when the environment was mistreated, the Boggart's actions grew more disruptive, reflecting the growing discord between humans and nature. These myths also touched on the consequences of neglecting the environment. In one tale, a village that overfarmed its fields without regard for the land's recovery faced a series of Boggart-induced troubles, cattle falling ill, crops failing, and homes falling into disrepair. The villagers soon realized that their greed and carelessness had angered the Boggart, who was seen as a guardian of the land's health. This realization brought about a change in behavior, with the villagers working to restore the land and appease the Boggart. The Boggart's connection to the environment is a reflection of the deeper, often unspoken bond between people and nature. The folklore portrays a world where every action has consequences and where the balance between human activity and the natural world is delicate and vital. The tales remind us of the importance of maintaining that balance and respecting the environment, embodying a form of ancient ecological wisdom that is as relevant today as it was centuries ago. Through these stories, the Boggart becomes more than a figure of fear or mischief. It transforms into a symbol of the environment's voice, a reminder that nature, though often silent, communicates its needs and responses through subtle, sometimes eerie signs. The tales of Boggarts, with their haunting presence and mischievous acts, are woven into the very fabric of English folklore, reflecting our enduring relationship with the natural world and the need to nurture and protect it. In the heart of English folklore, the Boggart is more than just a mischievous spirit, it's a powerful metaphor for the deepest fears and anxieties that grip society. These tales, passed down through generations, reveal how the Boggart embodies our collective fears, shaping and reflecting the struggles of the times. Consider the story of a small village plagued by a Boggart that seemed to embody every fear the villagers had. The creature was known for its unsettling habit of creating chaos in homes and fields, stirring up distress and discomfort. But beyond the surface, this Boggart represented something much larger, the anxiety of the unknown and the fear of losing control over one's environment. The more the villagers tried to banish the Boggart, the more it seemed to thrive on their panic, symbolizing how societal fears can often grow and intensify when faced with denial and avoidance. In another tale, the Boggart is a shadowy figure that haunts a family's home, causing strange noises and disruptions. As the family struggles to understand the Boggart's motives, they become consumed by fear and suspicion, tearing apart the close-knit bonds they once shared. Here, the Boggart serves as a metaphor for internal anxieties that can erode relationships and stability. It highlights how the fears we don't confront or understand can lead to turmoil and disarray in our lives. Throughout history, the Boggart has appeared in stories reflecting societal changes and tensions. During times of economic hardship, Boggarts were said to cause misfortune and loss, mirroring the fear and uncertainty that came with financial instability. When new social or technological changes disrupted traditional ways of life, Boggarts were often depicted as symbols of resistance to these changes, representing the fear of the unknown and the anxiety of adapting to new realities. The Boggart also reflects personal fears and insecurities. In many stories, the Boggart takes on the appearance of the most feared and unsettling things to its victims. It morphs into whatever scares them the most, whether it's a haunting apparition or a strange creature. This adaptability makes the Boggart a powerful metaphor for how our fears can take on different forms depending on our individual anxieties and insecurities. It shows that the Boggart, in its various manifestations, embodies the personal and collective fears that people face, turning them into tangible threats. These stories also reveal how Boggarts can act as reflections of societal guilt and moral failings. When the villagers in a tale fail to treat their land with respect, the Boggart's mischief intensifies, symbolizing the consequences of their moral lapses. The Boggart becomes a living reminder of the repercussions of their actions, representing societal guilt and the fear of facing the results of one's own mistakes. In modern times, the Boggart has continued to serve as a metaphor for contemporary fears. In literature and media, Boggarts are often used to explore themes of anxiety, uncertainty, and the struggle to understand the things that haunt us. They appear as symbols of the pervasive fears that modern society grapples with, be it the fear of failure, the dread of the unknown, or the anxiety of confronting uncomfortable truths. These tales, whether set in ancient villages or modern narratives, use the Boggart to reflect the anxieties of their time. By embodying our deepest fears and anxieties, the Boggart acts as a mirror, showing us the unsettling aspects of ourselves and society that we might otherwise avoid or ignore. The creature's haunting presence in folklore serves as a poignant reminder of the power of fear and the ways in which it shapes our lives and societies. In the realm of folklore studies, the Boggart stands as a captivating symbol of the mysterious and the unsettling. Scholars who explore folklore often find themselves drawn to the Boggart's enigmatic nature, intrigued by how this creature embodies the fears and beliefs of past societies. Consider the academic fascination with Boggarts as more than just an interest in mythical creatures. Each tale of a Boggart is like a thread in a larger tapestry that reveals the intricacies of human psychology and societal norms. Folklore researchers examine these stories not just for their narrative value, but for the deeper meanings they carry about the cultures that created them. The Boggart, with its unsettling presence and mischievous behavior, offers a unique window into the fears and anxieties that permeated the lives of those who believed in it. Scholars have long been fascinated by how Boggarts reflect the fears of the unknown and the way people used folklore to explain and cope with the inexplicable. The Boggart's ability to adapt and change form, reflecting the fears of those who encounter it, makes it a powerful metaphor for the shifting anxieties of different times and places. In academic circles, Boggarts are studied not just as individual entities but as part of a broader pattern of supernatural beings. They are often compared to other folkloric creatures that serve similar purposes, such as the will-o'-the-wisp or the poltergeist. By placing Boggarts within this larger context, scholars can explore how different cultures address common fears through their own unique supernatural figures. The study of Boggarts also illuminates how folklore is used to navigate societal changes. As England transitioned from agrarian societies to industrial ones, the nature of Boggart stories shifted, reflecting the anxieties of those times. Scholars analyze how these changes in Boggart tales mirror broader social transformations and the ways in which folklore adapts to address new fears and challenges. Researchers also focus on the role of Boggarts in community life and how they were used to enforce social norms and behaviors. Tales of Boggarts often served as warnings or lessons, illustrating the consequences of breaking societal rules or failing to respect traditions. By studying these stories, scholars gain insight into how folklore functioned as a tool for social cohesion and control. Moreover, the Boggart's role in folklore studies highlights the interplay between fear and storytelling. The way Boggarts are depicted in various tales, whether as mischievous tricksters or malevolent spirits, reveals much about the psychological and cultural functions of fear. Folklore researchers explore how these stories use fear to convey moral lessons, address social anxieties, and offer explanations for the unknown. In the academic study of folklore, the Boggart represents the intersection of myth, psychology, and culture. It's a symbol of how humans use stories to make sense of their world and their inner fears. By examining the Boggart through various lenses, from its role in cautionary tales to its place in modern media, scholars uncover the profound ways in which folklore reflects and shapes human experience. As researchers continue to explore the Boggart's place in folklore studies, they reveal the deeper truths about human nature and society. Each tale and each scholarly analysis adds another layer to our understanding of this enigmatic creature, offering valuable insights into the fears, beliefs, and values of those who brought the Boggart to life. As the world transforms with rapid advances in technology and shifts in cultural norms, one might wonder what becomes of the ancient Boggart myths that once haunted the dark corners of England. In a landscape dominated by digital screens and global connectivity, the future of these age-old tales may seem uncertain. Yet, there's something profoundly moving about the idea that these stories might not only survive but evolve in ways that resonate with modern sensibilities. Boggarts, with their eerie presence and mischievous antics, represent a connection to a time when the unknown was a tangible part of daily life. They were more than just creatures of folklore, they were manifestations of fears and anxieties that people could understand and confront through storytelling. In a world where the pace of life is ever quickening and the mysteries of old are often replaced by scientific explanations, it might seem as though Boggarts are relics of a bygone era. But the heart of these myths, an embodiment of the unknown and the uncanny, still strikes a chord with human nature. In the future, Boggarts might find new forms and meanings in our increasingly digital world. Just as stories have adapted over centuries, they could morph into new narratives that reflect contemporary fears and challenges. Imagine Boggarts as digital phantoms, haunting virtual spaces, or as symbols of our anxieties about technology. They could become characters in virtual reality experiences or augmented reality games, embodying the same sense of unease and intrigue that they once did in the misty woodlands and creaking cottages of old. The essence of Boggarts might also persist in the growing trend of blending traditional folklore with modern storytelling. Creators could weave Boggarts into novels, films, and television shows, reimagining them as metaphors for today's fears and uncertainties. The dark, brooding figures of folklore could become symbols of our struggles with identity, privacy, and the impact of technology on our lives. In this way, Boggarts would not merely be preserved, but would find relevance in the collective imagination of a new generation. The future might also see Boggarts as part of educational and cultural initiatives that aim to preserve and celebrate folklore. Schools and museums could use these myths to teach about cultural heritage and the role of storytelling in shaping human experience. The tales of Boggarts could serve as a bridge between past and present, helping people connect with their history while offering fresh perspectives on the stories that have shaped our understanding of the world. As society continues to evolve, the allure of the supernatural will likely remain a constant. The Boggart, with its enigmatic and often unsettling nature, embodies a timeless fascination with the unknown. Its role in folklore reflects a deep-seated need to confront our fears through stories. Even as the contexts and formats change, the fundamental human desire to grapple with the mysterious and the uncanny endures. In an age where the supernatural might be overshadowed by the concrete and the rational, Boggarts could emerge as powerful symbols of our ongoing struggle with the intangible aspects of existence. Their future might not be one of fading into obscurity, but of finding new ways to haunt our imaginations, offering a reminder of the mysteries that still lurk beyond the edges of our understanding. As we look forward, the future of Boggarts is intertwined with the very nature of storytelling and human connection. They represent a bridge between the past and the future, a reminder that while the world changes, the fundamental questions and fears that drive us remain constant. In this ever-evolving landscape, Boggarts might just find new ways to capture our hearts and imaginations, proving that even the oldest myths have a place in the modern world. When the night falls and shadows dance at the edges of our vision, the Boggart of English folklore isn't the only creature that stirs. These enigmatic beings, known for their mischievous and sometimes malevolent behavior, have their counterparts in various cultures around the world. Their similarities and differences weave a fascinating tapestry of how humanity has grappled with the unknown and the uncanny across different lands and times. In Germany, there's the kobold, a creature akin to the Boggart. Kobolds are small, tricky beings that can be both helpful and harmful. They live in mines or old houses, and their presence is marked by strange noises or disturbances. Much like Boggarts, kobolds can be malevolent, causing trouble if not appeased, but they can also aid humans if they are treated well. The idea that a household spirit can both disrupt and assist reflects a common theme in folklore, the dual nature of the supernatural, where creatures embody our deepest fears and hopes. Moving to Scandinavian folklore, the Huldra represents another parallel. The Huldra, a beautiful woman with a hollow back and a cow's tail, is known for luring people into the woods. Though her primary role is to entice and ensnare, she also has a deeper connection to nature, embodying both the allure and danger of the wilderness. Like the Boggart, the Huldra's presence suggests that the natural world is filled with unseen forces that are at once enchanting and frightening. This blend of beauty and danger serves as a reminder of the fine line between fascination and fear. In the Slavic tradition, the domovoi serves as another comparison. The domovoi is a household spirit believed to protect the home and its occupants. Though generally benevolent, if disrespected, this spirit could become vengeful, causing mischief and discomfort. The domovoi's role highlights how folklore often reflects a society's need to understand and manage the forces within their everyday lives. Just like the Boggart, the domovoi is a constant reminder of the invisible presence that influences our surroundings, emphasizing the importance of respect and caution. In Japanese folklore, the Tengu shares similarities with the Boggart. Tengu are mythical creatures often depicted with a human-like form and bird-like features. Known for their trickery and sometimes malevolent behavior, Tengu are both feared and respected. They inhabit remote mountains and forests, places associated with danger and mystery. The Tengu, much like the Boggart, represents the idea that the unseen world harbors beings that can disrupt human life, mirroring the folklore's function as a means to cope with the uncertainties of nature. In Celtic lore, we encounter the leprechaun, a creature known for its mischievous nature and its habit of hiding pots of gold. Leprechauns share with Boggarts a penchant for trickery, delighting in causing confusion and trouble. Their connection to hidden treasure speaks to a broader theme found in many cultures, the idea that the supernatural is often linked with hidden wealth or hidden dangers. This common thread illustrates how folklore often reflects humanity's fascination with the unknown and its potential rewards or risks. In each of these traditions, the creatures mirror the Boggart's role as both a symbol of fear and a figure of intrigue. They remind us that across cultures, the supernatural serves to address fundamental human concerns, the need to understand the world around us, the desire to find meaning in chaos, and the quest to navigate the balance between safety and danger. These comparisons highlight a universal thread in folklore, the presence of unseen forces that shape our lives and our fears. Whether it's the Boggart, the kobold, the huldra, the domovoi, the tengu, or the leprechaun, each creature embodies a complex mix of mischief, mystery, and moral lessons. They represent our deepest anxieties and our attempts to make sense of the world's hidden aspects. Through these diverse tales, we see that while the specifics may vary, the essence of these creatures remains strikingly similar. They are all part of a shared human experience, reflecting our universal need to confront and understand the mysteries that lie beyond the everyday. In the quiet corners of English villages, where the fog clings to the earth and old tales whisper through the trees, the Boggart has inspired a variety of rituals and traditions, each designed to deal with this elusive spirit in unique ways. These customs, steeped in history and local lore, reveal how communities have long grappled with the mischief and mystery of the Boggart. One of the most poignant rituals is the Boggart banishing ceremony, a practice rooted in the belief that specific rites can drive away these troublesome spirits. The ceremony often involves the entire household coming together, symbolizing the unity needed to face the supernatural. A common element is the lighting of a bonfire, believed to dispel the darkness where Boggarts might lurk. Families would throw items into the fire that were thought to be particularly offensive to the Boggart, things like old, worn-out shoes or broken tools. These objects, representing past troubles or misdeeds, were believed to carry away the Boggart's lingering influence. The fires crackling and popping were seen as the Boggart's malevolent intentions being consumed by the flames, leaving behind peace and safety. Another tradition involved Boggart-repelling tokens. These were small charms or amulets crafted by the household or gifted by local wise folk. Often made from materials like iron, which was thought to be particularly effective against spirits, these tokens were placed around the home to protect against the Boggart's mischief. The belief was that the iron, or sometimes herbs and salt, created a barrier that the Boggart could not cross. Families would often hang these tokens above doorways or in corners of the house where the Boggart was known to cause trouble. In some regions, midnight feasts were part of the Boggart lore. It was said that leaving a small meal out at midnight could appease a Boggart that had been causing disturbances. This tradition was rooted in the idea that offering food could turn the spirit's attention away from trouble and earn its favor. Families would leave out milk, bread, or a small piece of meat, often placing it in a secluded spot like the shed or the edge of the garden. The act of leaving out the food was both a gesture of respect and a hope that the Boggart would enjoy the offering and leave the household in peace. The Boggart scaring ritual was another vivid tradition, where villagers would gather to perform a play or reenactment meant to frighten away the Boggart. Dressed in costumes and masks, the participants would act out scenes involving loud noises, exaggerated movements, and scary faces. The belief was that this display of fearsome antics would intimidate the Boggart into fleeing. The ritual was a community event, full of laughter and camaraderie, turning the fear of the Boggart into a collective celebration of courage. In some areas, Boggart binding ceremonies were performed, where families would write out a special incantation or charm on a piece of paper and bury it under the doorstep. The idea was that the written words would bind the Boggart, preventing it from entering the home or causing harm. These charms were often inscribed with symbols or phrases meant to capture the Boggart's essence and render it powerless. Annual Boggart hunts also formed part of local tradition. During certain times of the year, typically in the autumn, villagers would set out to find and confront the Boggart. This wasn't a literal hunt, but rather a symbolic act. Villagers would walk the fields and forests, carrying lanterns and singing old songs. The purpose was to drive the Boggart away by showing that the community was united and unafraid. The walk was as much about affirming the villagers' bond as it was about confronting the spirit. Lastly, the Boggarts' favorite ritual was a practice where a family would perform a small, private ceremony to ensure continued peace and goodwill with the Boggart. This often involved a personal offering or a prayer recited in the quiet of the home. The ritual was meant to show respect and acknowledge the Boggart's presence, ensuring that the spirit would remain benign and not cause trouble. Each of these rituals reveals a deep-seated desire to understand and control the unseen forces believed to influence daily life. They show how the Boggart, with all its mischief and mystery, was more than just a figure of fear. It was part of a complex relationship between people and the supernatural. Through these traditions, communities sought to find balance, safety, and a sense of harmony in a world where the Boggart's shadow loomed large. In the flickering light of a dying fire, where shadows dance and old tales come alive, the Boggart stands as a testament to the power of folklore. These creatures of myth, once feared and revered, have etched their presence deeply into the fabric of English culture, leaving a legacy that persists through generations. The Boggart story begins in the whispers of ancient woods and the corners of darkened cottages. It's a legacy born from the human need to understand the unexplainable and to find meaning in the chaos of life. Even as the world has changed, with its bustling cities and advancing technology, the Boggart's presence reminds us of a time when the unknown was both a threat and a source of wonder. Every family that once gathered around a hearth to perform a Boggart banishment ceremony or place protective tokens around their home carries a piece of this legacy. The Boggart was not merely a creature to be feared, it was a symbol of the challenges and uncertainties that people faced daily. Its story spoke to the heart of human experience, reflecting a time when nature and the supernatural were closely intertwined. In literature, the Boggart's eerie charm lives on through stories that capture the imagination. Writers have taken these ancient tales and woven them into new narratives, reimagining the Boggart for a modern audience. This transformation keeps the essence of the Boggart alive, showing that while the form might change, the heart of the myth remains constant. It's a reminder that our fears and folklore, though they may evolve, are timeless. The Boggart also lives in the traditions and customs that have been passed down through generations. Whether it's through the ritual of leaving out midnight feasts or the symbolic acts of protection, these practices reflect a deep-seated respect for the mysteries of the world. They show how communities have historically sought to balance their fears with their hopes, turning ancient beliefs into practices that offer comfort and connection. Modern culture, with its fascination for the paranormal and the mystical, continues to find inspiration in the Boggart. Films, television shows, and books often draw on the Boggart's characteristics, adapting them to fit contemporary settings. This not only keeps the Boggart relevant, but also highlights how deeply ingrained these myths are in our collective consciousness. The Boggart's ability to adapt to new contexts while retaining its core essence speaks to its enduring power. Even in everyday language, the Boggart's legacy persists. Expressions and phrases that reference these mythical creatures remind us of their impact on our cultural lexicon. They reflect how folklore continues to shape our understanding of the world, blending ancient fears with modern sensibilities. In essence, the Boggart embodies the fears, hopes, and curiosities of the human spirit. Its legacy is not just about the stories told, but also about the emotions they evoke. The Boggart's shadowy presence reminds us of the deep connection between myth and reality, and how our ancestors grappled with the unknown in ways that still resonate today. Through every tale, every tradition, and every adaptation, the Boggart's spirit lives on, a spectral echo of a time when the world was full of mystery and magic. It stands as a symbol of how our cultural stories, no matter how ancient, continue to shape and reflect who we are. The Boggart's enduring legacy is a testament to the power of myth to connect us to our past and to each other.